my children, and welcome once again to Longbox of the Damned! So earlier this year, a lot of you got to see the Avengers from the movies dying! Oh, but my children, it certainly wasn't the first time that happened. Zombies Assemble began life as a manga by Yusaka Komiyama and was finally translated over to America. What's even more unique about it is that the cast of Avengers are specifically those from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, set between the first and second movies. Which I can get behind because those movies have an astonishing lack of undead characters in them. It's Tony Stark's birthday, and Pepper Potts puts this embarrassing hat on him. And it's at that exact moment that Tony decided he was going to eat every single one of them. Captain America tries to pull a prank on Tony by attacking him from behind as a zombie, but Tony sees right through it and pulls off his mask. Unfortunately, that leaves them thoroughly unprepared for when an actual zombie walks in and almost bites Tony's finger off. Black Widow is quick to kill it as Tony seals up the building, Captain America commenting that it's so weird that a real zombie was at the birthday party too. But as Tony points out, it already has super soldiers, green gamma monsters, and hammer-wielding thunder gods, so it's not that weird. But the only one that got shot was The Walking Dead. Pretty prejudiced if you ask me. The zombie was a member of Stark Industries' Research and Development Division, where they were working with biotech. Tony is genre-savvy enough to know that it could be a virus, not made better as Jarvis's internal scans indicate that the last 10 civilians in Stark Tower slowly begin dying off one by one and transformed into zombies. As Tony points out, it looks like they got him a horror movie for his birthday. The greatest gift of all! The Avengers Assemble. But before they can deal with the 10 zombies roaming around, it seems their number has increased to 11. With Thor! Yes, he has been transformed into a zombie, yet he retains most of his faculties even when half his face is melting. They're not sure how or when he got infected, but the damage is done. He can no longer lift Mjolnir, and one of his eyeballs falls out. He's so confused by the situation that he thinks the eyeball is one of Black Widow's beauty accessories. Well, I think they are, at least. They lock Thor away in a Hulk containment unit until they sort it out. And Black Widow soon realizes that the zombie plague is not spread through biting, but by touch, since she is now infected as well. Like Thor, she retains enough of her mind to say she has to be locked up too. Unfortunately, containment may not be possible. The plague has already begun spreading out to New York. Thor escapes his containment, but they're able to knock him out with the help of Dr. Toshiko Amano and a recovered Chitauri gun. Looking over photos of the zombified Thor and the earlier shot zombie, they realize that the plague is actually making them look similar to the Chitauri. Dr. Amano admits that this may have been her fault. She recovered Chitauri cells from the gun and planned to experiment on them to see what new discoveries could be made with them. But she wasn't authorized to experiment on it herself, and the cells got stolen from her on the subway when she attempted to transfer it out of Stark Tower. Fortunately, she has an antivirus that they use on Thor, which seems to reverse the Chitauri appearance. But then he starts getting very hungry. After sedating him, they learn that the isolation zone in New York containing the zombies has been breached. One of the zombies exploded like a bomb. More zombies show up as the Avengers confront them, unwilling to kill innocent victims. But their bodies start swelling up like the one that blew up. Back at the lab, Dr. Amano and Bruce Banner work on a new antivirus. Unfortunately, they're unwilling to try it on Thor because he might fly into another rage. Banner, having feelings for Black Widow, doesn't want to risk the antivirus on her in case it makes things worse. So instead, Dr. Amano volunteers to be the new test subject, deliberately infecting herself. Unfortunately, after some touching moments between the two about the nature of the Hulk destroying Banner's life, it becomes clear the antivirus isn't working on her. As Amano's condition worsens, she mentions Jasper. Banner finds some research files which reveal that someone helped her develop the Chitauri virus by that name. And it seems the mysterious Jasper is watching things unfold too. Looking at the records, Banner discovers that the reason the antivirus didn't work is that someone altered her research on the virus, so it's working on a false version of events. He develops a new antivirus, but soon she escapes and manages to bite the good doctor. And his heart rate begins to accelerate. And I'm sure if this was in color, his skin would be quite green right now. Although considering zombie viruses sometimes turn people pale or bluish, does that mean he's going to have more of a cyan color? The three Avengers who had been facing the Horde wake up and find themselves not infected, but cured by a man identifying himself as Dr. Scott. Tony sees right through him, since anyone who could develop a cure faster than Bruce Banner should be on his radar. But unfortunately, there's no more time. He says the zombie plague is a water pox, where the subject breaks out with blisters that burst and make the virus go airborne. It takes about 3 to 5 hours for that to develop. And it's been over 3 hours since Thor and Black Widow were infected, so he gives them the last of his cure to try to help them. And he leaves by giving his full name, Dr. Jasper Scott. And as the three leave, he comments about how Tony Stark used to be brilliant, a lot more impressive when his company made weapons. They were like works of art! And say, don't all these bound and gagged people agree? The Avengers have to fight off the zombified Hulk, but fortunately Thor and Black Widow arrived to help, cured thanks to Banner and Dr. Amano right before he transformed. When they reveal that it was Jasper Scott who gave them the cure, Amano realizes that the other three Avengers weren't cured at all, but given a new version of the plague that lacks such a cure. Amano reveals that Jasper is her younger half-brother, who, during an accident, lost 2 fingers that were regrown thanks to the Chitauri cells. Seeing the medical potential, they experimented further, but of course it just resulted in these zombies and lab rats. Jasper saw the potential in it as a weapon, and the two broke ties. Jasper contacts them to show them that he's already begun spreading the virus, and when they confront him, he shows he has control over the zombies and demands only one thing. He wants Tony Stark to go back to making weapons. If he does, he'll stop the zombies. But of course, as Tony looks at the devastation wrought by even just this little plague, he cannot do so. Jasper explains that he believes weapons protect the world, that 6 people are not enough to save it. They can't be everywhere at once. There need to be more deterrents. With the right weapon, anyone can be a hero. So, does he plan to give everyone a nuke? Because I won't trust some people to borrow a cell phone, much less a weapon. But of course, Tony has the simple answer to that. A weapon in the hands of the righteous can be good, but a weapon in the wrong hands only causes destruction, and you can't control whose hands are which. Jasper runs off, but soon learns that he has been infected all along with the Chitauri cells, slowly mutating him into a new creature. He's not contagious, but he knows he cannot cure it. When he realized his death was inevitable, he wanted to see how far it could go. Ordinary citizens spot him and call him a monster, and he tries to attack, but Dr. Amano gets in the way of his blow. He mutates further, horrified by what he's done, but he's too far gone, forcing the Avengers to put him down.
Bruce uses the virus to heal Amano. After all, Thor's eyeball regrew when he recovered.
Although fate, it seems, really didn't want him to have it anymore.
And she manages to recover, with it being revealed that before he turned, Jasper handed over his data on the zombie plague to Bruce Banner to fix all this later, on the condition only that he never show it to Tony Stark. After all, old habits die hard. To really show how this zombie story breaks from the conventions of those that came before it, this one ends pretty happily. Dr. Amano cured, the remaining zombie virus contained on Asgard in its vault, and everyone infected cured.
But of course they save the day! To quote Thor, that's what heroes do! Oh, but my children, while the day has been saved this time, we've still got another 30 to go. Just paint your face the shadows smile, my children! Time again for some love and revenge from beyond the grave. Or should I say, it's dead time again.
While Eric Draven did in fact make a handful of appearances after his original miniseries, this was the first time someone else wore the makeup. Joshua, a Native American man from the Crow Nation, wakes up in a city and is very confused by his surroundings, particularly because he remembers dying during the Civil War. Yes, in the 1860s he lived as a farmer with his wife, a white woman named Maudie, when a group of Confederate soldiers asked to stay at their house and lick their wounds. The two refused, with Maudie even aiming a shotgun at them. However, they quickly found the two's son and, being racist bastards, murdered the entire family. You would think then that this story would be a period piece, the Crow getting his vengeance during the Civil War. But no! He is resurrected during modern times.
This is what happens when you add a lot of bureaucracy to your undead killing sprees. Takes forever to finally get all the paperwork done.
Actually, while it's odd that it takes so long for him to rise from his grave, he does not lack for targets of his revenge. For it seems that the souls of those Confederates have not made their way to hell. Instead, they were given a second chance to atone for their misdeeds through reincarnation. And instead, they have been squandered. They now reside in a group of murderous bikers, accompanied by a woman named Roseanne. The bikers attack and kill some drug dealers who were operating in their territory, much to Roseanne's horror. She was just a judge's daughter looking to rebel a bit, not get involved in such violence and death. But she soon has more than enough of both, as Joshua's crow leads him to the bikers. There can be no peace for Joshua while there's still so much pain in his heart, and that won't be resolved while the men of evil go unpunished. Time is no barrier, death is no barrier, and soon he confronts the bikers, recognizing them instantly as his attackers. The Confederates told Joshua that if he gets his revenge, it will only be in the hereafter. And he waited at the gates of hell for them. They shoot him, impale him, but nothing works. They're only able to leave when they think they killed him, Roseanne having run off in fear of what they would do next. The bikers discuss what happened, one in particular named Varney, sensing the truth about their relationship to Joshua, but the others are more concerned about Roseanne, thinking she might talk to the police about their various criminal enterprises. Joshua soon finds one of the bikers' associates and deals with them, making him call the bikers to warn them of his coming. Varney can tell of his approach too, for in his mind's eye he sees the sky turning black from the wings of millions of crows swarming across it. While the remaining bikers go off on a lead on Roseanne, Joshua reaches Varney, holding him over the edge of a building, until the crow informs him that Roseanne is in danger from the others. Varney pleads that he was not like the others. He never killed anyone. Joshua struggles with a decision on him, sensing that indeed he did not personally hurt anyone, but he did stand by and do nothing to stop it. Still, he believes that he is not without redemption, and merely sends him into a pile of garbage. But the others will not be so fortunate. The bikers take Roseanne to a bridge, getting ready to throw her off, but Joshua arrives to save her. The bikers catch on that the crow is the source of his power and attack it to harm him, but he still manages to turn things around. He tells Roseanne to look away while he extracts justice. 100 years too late, perhaps, but fate moves in circles, as does the train line, which proceeds to run both Joshua and the last biker over. Joshua, of course, has nothing to worry about there, and finally manages to move into the hereafter, where his face is painted black, the color of revenge.
Admittedly, this one is not as good as the previous two Crow stories we have looked at, my children, but it still contains the same amount of blood, crying out for blood, that we have come to hope for with this series. Would you like a jelly baby, my children? Well, too bad I don't have any sweets on me. Save that for Halloween. But what I do have is a pair of Doctor Who comics.
This two-parter, The Dogs of Doom, begins with an attack on the New Earth system in the far future of the 25th century by the Werelocks. The Werelocks are savage, aggressive, bestial conquerors who of course resemble a certain horror movie monster we all know and love.
That's right! They're all Frankenstein's monster.
No, of course the Werelocks are indeed werewolves. It is a fact that is demonstrated quite well when a group of humans who have been clawed by the Werelocks are exposed to some moonlight and transform into Werelocks themselves. It is also a fact that a poor commander on the Davy Crockett colony learns all too sadly as he is surrounded by the former humans. The fourth Doctor, in the meantime, is trying to get his new companion, Sharon Davies, back to her home in Black Castle, but the TARDIS has veered off course and they land on a space freighter. Unfortunately, the freighter soon finds itself under attack by the Werelocks, groups of them soon boarding it. Fortunately, aside for the weapons the two crew members, Joe and Babe, carry with them, the Doctor has K9 with him, and they're able to stun the Werelocks, but not before they claw at the Doctor's arm. The Doctor examines one of the unconscious Werelocks and discovers venom ducts in both their claws and fangs, but unfortunately for him, the ship just happens to be passing by the light of a moon. Yes, the Doctor becomes a werewolf, Werelock.
Ah, screw it, you know what this show's about. A freaking werewolf!
He fights off the bestial instincts now present in him, managing to stop himself from attacking anyone, but forcing himself into the TARDIS with K9. For the next 3 months, during periods of lucidity, during the times when K9 isn't stunning him, he manages to work on a cure for his condition, finally arriving back on the freighter 10 minutes after he left. Using hypnosis, he gets one Werelock named Brill to admit to who it was that gave them all their advanced technology and weapons, since the Werelocks clearly don't have the mental capacity for such things, revealing that they are servants of the Daleks!
To hell with robot men! Toss aside pigmen and ogrons! I say that the Daleks should always be using werewolves as their servants!
The Daleks kill the leader of the Werelock ship sent to take over the freighter as a warning to the rest to stay in line and actually succeed. The Doctor, in the meantime, decides to pay the Daleks a visit with Brill in tow, still obedient thanks to the hypnosis. He's still violent, of course, but his hunger for violence is directed at the Daleks and other Werelocks, though. They storm the ship, eventually discovering that the Daleks are planning to clear the new Earth system of life to begin breeding a new race of Daleks, utilizing the genetic material of various animals, taking the best examples of cruelty, slyness, and insane hatred, and purifying them into new, better killing machines. With K9's help, they free the animals to cause a distraction and get away. Back on the freighter, they have decided to try to do something about the Daleks too, planning a suicide run on their ship. Joe, however, stuffs Babe and Sharon into an escape pod so he can make the run on his own, not wanting the two to be killed. However, the Doctor manages to go deeper into the Dalek ship, discovering time travel equipment that he uses to put the Daleks and the Werelocks into a kind of time lock, locked forever in a single moment in time and space. The entire ship is taken out of time, while the Doctor returns to New Earth with the still-alive freighter crew, letting Brill stay on New Earth to help their military forces.
You see, my children, if even the Doctor can see the value in friendship with a werewolf and other such creatures, perhaps you should be more open to being friends with monsters. The box. You opened it. I came, my children. When last we looked at Boom Studios' Hellraiser comics, Pinhead had been restored to life as a mortal, and Kirsty Cotton had taken his place as Hell's priest. So, let's see how that plays out, shall we?
Since his resurrection, Captain Elliot Spencer has been working with dear Tiffany from the second movie, now with her own group dedicated to continuing Kirsty's work of destroying all the Lemmer-Kent devices. However, he seems to have lost his memories. He recalls some things, glimpses of his life that he had before, but nothing else. Still, the part of him that began this journey is there, especially evident as he enters a church and mocks Jesus, saying that it took him 40 days to ascend to heaven after his resurrection. Spencer says he'll do it without Daddy's help.
Well, that's good and all, but I don't think you'll be winning points with the boss by insulting his son.
Tiffany goes on her own to a brothel to deal with a box, soon finding herself surrounded in an orgy of blood, bodies, and barbed wire. However, before the ritual of death can claim her as a victim, Kirsty appears to sever the chains and talk to her. Kirsty takes her to the pit of hell and explains that while they thought they were doing the right thing by destroying the boxes, in reality, it actually makes things that much harder. There is indeed a cosmic plan in place, that hell serves as true punishment for the damned and a way to stop the spark of evil from turning into a fire that could consume the whole world. She thought she could change the system from within, but the truth is that the system already works. Sure, her entire family was destroyed by this, but the sad truth is that stuff like that happens and ultimately serves the greater good, as it were. Or the greater order, at least. Tiffany says she will go on destroying the boxes, especially now that they have the help of a supernatural detective by the name of Harry D'Amour. A name that is not popular amongst the denizens of hell. Still, Tiffany requests that Spencer be given his memories back, so that he can put his life back together again. And hey, if this goes badly, then Kirsty's the best one to stop him given her new powers. And so Spencer gets his full memories back, and knows now what he must do. As Kirsty and her own little group of Cenobites, her skinless monsters, aka former companions, refuse to take the innocent souls of some tribesmen who accidentally opened the box, Spencer leads Tiffany's group to India, where he had first become Pinhead. He recounts what happened, he and 2 other soldiers coming across a tree of dead bodies, and he was inspired. It was a work of horror art to him, and thus he needed to know what it meant, be it from heaven or hell. And thus he sought out deeper pleasures, the lament configuration, and all that it brought with it. Hell speaks to Kirsty, saying that this was all part of the former priest's plan. For some reason, he wanted the toy maker's devices destroyed. All they know is that there are consequences to this action. But whatever that design is, it happens as Tiffany destroys the box that Spencer had originally used. Spencer finds himself speaking with a different sort of priest who knows what he would do. In Spencer's own words, he wants to make the world bleed. Kirsty, meanwhile, has a little spiritual journey of her own when she opens a box while already in hell. What it is she speaks to is uncertain, possibly a manifestation of the Hell Priest regardless of whoever is occupying the role, but they make it clear that she is not where she is meant to be, and if she wants her humanity back, she must stop Spencer without killing him. It is a guideline that should be easy to follow, since Spencer finishes his own quest. Hell's forces and walls are going insane. A light has appeared in the sky and is draining away what lies in the pit. And Spencer himself? Well, a shovel to the face doesn't even faze him, so that's a thing now. But where that goes is a story for another day.
Well, the story has shifted away from the more grounded stories of the Hellraiser universe. The story of Kirsty and Pinhead has continued. And they have such sights to show us. Secret salutations, my children! Remember when we talked about a storyline featuring the mercenary group Secret Six? And how there was a card that would allow you to get out of hell free? Well, whatever became of that card,
Scandal Savage, daughter of immortal Wandel Savage, had absconded with the card in secret, but she had a disturbing dream from her now deceased lover Knockout, one of the former female furies of Apocalypse, who shows her in hell and desperate for escape. So Scandal is all too happy to use the card to get her out. But it's been stolen! Yes, one of her compatriots took it for use on another of their fallen comrades. In this case, the disturbed contortionist Ragdoll wishes to use it to recover Parademon, another expatriate of Apocalypse. In their struggle, Scandal stabs him in the stomach, so he has no choice but to utilize the card, escaping into hell, with the probable intention to leave again too. However, Black Alice points out that they really don't want to go to hell, especially since in the DC universe, hell has had something of a civil war as of late, with the demoness Lady Blaze emerging on top. She refuses to join them, warning that nothing decent survives hell, but does at least show them the way, an elevator in an outlet mall.
Hell is a clearance sale that has nothing you want.
The elevator is guarded by two eyeless minions of the Dark Pit, who demand a pound of flesh before they can enter. Catman takes that pound out of the guard, telling the other to warn Hell. The Secret Six are coming to take back one of their own. They are met by Etrigan the Demon, who in turn warns them that Ragdoll in his short time has already become a new prince of hell. To make the torment more unbearable, a second on Earth could be days in hell, and he has spent so many seconds there that he has been driven even more mad than before. While he's quite content here along with Parademon, he refuses to hand back the card. After all, what if he changes his mind? Catman, meanwhile, splits off from the others. He has other business in hell. He has come to confirm that it has a permanent resident here, namely his abusive lout of a father. And indeed, he is there. His hell is to be devoured by Catman's mother, conscious of every step as he is consumed, defecated, reborn, and the whole process starts all over. The circle of life, my children. The others, meanwhile, have mixed reactions when they learn that they too are eventually destined for hell. Most accepted that as given considering their occupations, though Bane in particular does not accept that. After all, he is a righteous man, and he will not be damned on their say-so. Things are not made any easier when they discover that a brainwashed knockout has been promised as Ragdoll's bride in hell. In the ensuing battle, Lady Blaze herself appears and decides to prepare the group for hell, subjecting them to their own individual torments. Deadshot out of bullets, King Shark forced to attend a vegetarian dinner, truly the worst things that could ever happen to these murderous miscreants. When that ends, the Secret Six still stand determined. Eventually, they will overpower hell. They will not be broken. Lady Blaze lets them go, but promises that while Scandal will regain one of her lovers, she will lose the other. Oh, did I not mention that, my children? Yes, during all of this, Scandal's current girlfriend is in the middle of being kidnapped and tortured by a fundamentalist Christian who plans to break her of her wicked ways through torture. Fortunately, once they are out of hell, the Six are quick to locate and deal with him, making a little agreement. If he can reach the van, he can leave. Problem is, he has to get through the others first, who gladly bite off his fingers, break his wrist, and shoot him through the kneecap. Scandal's girlfriend, Liana, pleads with them to spare him, for she has her own relationship with God, and she believes in mercy. And so the Banshee Jeanette sings her a lullaby to help her calm down, while Scandal shoves 2 spikes into her tormentor's face.
We all have our own hells, my children. Some seem minor to others. Some might even be bearable to the righteous. But in the end, the power to overcome our hells comes not only from our own inner strength, but in the power of our loved ones to help us through it. Witchy welcome, my children! Never assume you're alone. You always have someone out there who is rooting for you, wants to be with you, wants to support and love you. Sometimes it's Muerte, but other times it's Evil Witch Alley.
Jake is a teenager who lives by a bog, one that has especially dark water inside of it. Occasionally, he hears sounds coming from it, of animals getting trapped inside of it until they sink into its murky depths. Naturally, there are ghost stories about it, of the man standing on the lake who offers you riches if you step onto the water, of a ghostly reflection coming out to kill you if you stare into the water and say, "Mirror," several times. But hey, those are just ghost stories, aren't they? Besides, Jake would much rather hear about his neighbor Cal, the one he has a crush on, but he's too afraid to ask him out or anything. On Halloween night, though, while he is home alone to hand out candy to trick-or-treaters, he spots the titular witch Allie standing in the bog, beginning to sink. While she seems unconcerned about this, Jake runs out and pulls her free, her boots sinking down like so many other creatures. He needn't have been concerned, though. Allie is a witch! See, she's even got a magic ring. It changes colors and everything. Jake wants to call her parents, while she just wants to talk about how she thinks it's important to confront the unknown, so that you can learn to control it and wreak vengeance on your enemies. That's why she's here. She's heard the ghost stories about the lake and doesn't want to leave until she sees one. But they are called away by Cal's mother, who brings the two to her house. Jake finally gets to talk to Cal, and it would appear that they may indeed have some similar interests, especially when he mentions that he has indeed seen and heard ghosts in the lake. Allie, meanwhile, uses her magic ring to trace something into the basement of Cal's home. An amalgam. But then someone closes the door to the cellar, leaving her in the darkness. Cal goes to speak with his mother, and Jake overhears some of their conversation. Enough to make him think he isn't welcome, although he is indeed welcome. After all, the ghost of Allie insists that he stay. Before he can finish calling the police, Cal's mother tries to pull the cell phone from his hand, and instead gets her arm pulled off. We learn how, once upon a time, Cal hit a dog while driving and dumped its body in the bog. And the dog came back as a ghost. The amalgam made a deal with Cal, getting him to continue feeding it, but its appetite grew larger and hungrier, eventually eating his mother. If not for the ghostly recreation of said mother, his own guilt and terror might have made him flee long ago. But instead, Jake flees, dragged down by the dark bog. The amalgam is a black hole, one of loneliness and despair. The more you dump into it, the emptier it becomes. Allie finds him, but she's just as stuck as he is, her ring malfunctioning because of how powerful it has become. But Jake is special. He can hear the ghosts, follow their despair until they reach the center of the amalgam. An amalgam doesn't need anything huge to start, just a soul that dies scared and alone, that draws in other like-minded souls. Allie contains the heart of the amalgam, a dead baby bird, and reassures it that it is not alone, sealing it in her grimoire. The amalgam is defeated, Cal is arrested for the murder of his mother, and Allie leaves behind a little gift to Jake for his help. A bag of candy, though admittedly she ate a bunch of it already. Although Jake's troubles are just beginning, because without the amalgam, the ghosts need somewhere else to crash.
Remember, my children, never let yourself be dragged down by your own loneliness. Moarte is always here to have some fun with you. Godzilla greetings, my children! You know, a couple months ago, some scientist used the Longbox for a few videos on Godzilla. Maybe he had the right idea. So let's talk a little about a done-in-one with the king, shall we?
This was during his Marvel run in the 70s, when Godzilla was rampaging around America and toppling cities on the West Coast. And in this one, we see him having some fun at the Nevada-Arizona border, smashing Boulder Dam. Although given this artwork on the first page, maybe it's not so much smashing as he thinks it's a door.
Knock knock, who's there? Godzilla!
The destruction of the dam sends Godzilla rolling through small towns in Nevada on a wave of water until he ends up right outside of Las Vegas. On the Las Vegas Strip, though, is the real subject of today's horror. Winslow Bennett, who entered Las Vegas with plenty of money, and has walked from one end of the city to the other, and has nothing to show for it but a single dime. He wonders, should he use his last dime on a phone call? Or one final crack at the slot machines, hoping that this, his last chance, will yield the results he needs. He needs money for his mother, it would seem. He can't let her die. And as the slot machine spins and stops on 2, and finally 3 cherries, Godzilla makes his attack. Coins fall from the machine as debris falls around a guard at the casino. The police moving in to try to do something, anything about Godzilla. But like Godzilla and his insatiable appetite for destruction, Winslow has dreams of his own with the money. It seems the coinage he won is not enough for his mother's operation, and he must bet it on some roulette. Mind you, Winslow has already lost so much that they need to check with the pit boss to confirm it's okay for him to make his bet. While the riot police must bet everything on taking out the king of the monsters. But like the flood of money that Winslow hopes for, the rest of Boulder Dam breaks, unleashing another torrent of water. Winslow bets it all on Red 13. And indeed, the ball lands on that, his lucky number! Unfortunately, it seems to be Godzilla's lucky number 2, as the wave crashes into Vegas and takes him surfing along the strip, washing away all the greed of the town, including Winslow Bedott and his winnings. Before he can touch a single dime, Winslow is carried away across the city. Godzilla, now finally ceasing his own journey as he reaches the outskirts of town, responds to the water with some atomic breath before moving on once more. As for Winslow, well, he finds a dime in the puddles, thinking that this must be the very same dime he started with, and decides to make his phone call this time. He calls his wife and informs her that indeed he went to Vegas and spent all his money gambling. But it was all for a good cause, don't you see? His mother was counting on him. His mother, that his wife informs him as she says she's finally leaving him, died 3 years ago. And he very well knows that.
Look, her zombie needs that money a lot, okay?
Winslow Bedott reverses the charges and gets his dime back, beginning the long walk. Like Godzilla, he moves on to the next town, Reno for him. After all, Mother's counting on him.
It's almost like a Twilight Zone episode, my children. A tale of the great big green monster inside many of us. The justifications we make for our terrible behavior. And how sometimes it is all washed away. Although the Twilight Zone could have used more Godzilla. It's a bug hunt, my children! A bug hunt! Last year, we took a look at the first of a series of connected mini-series in the Aliens vs. Predator franchise, Prometheus, Fire and Stone. So, let's look at the aliens side of the story, shall we?
In the Prometheus section, a group of scientists arrived on L223, the same site as the Prometheus expedition with Peter Weyland and company. There they were hunted by xenomorphs, a surviving engineer, and themselves as they turned on each other for their own unique reasons. The thing of note, though, was that they found an abandoned mining craft from the colony Hadley's Hope, aka the site of the xenomorph infestation from aliens. One of the survivors of that incident had set up shop in a cave and was studying the black goo from the engineer's ship. So, what's the story behind that cave and the wrecked ship? Well, that's the subject today. A group of survivors from Hadley's Hope desperately cram as many people as they can into a mining vessel, the Onager, before the xenomorphs can overrun them. One man, Kale, is asked whether or not it's safe to take off, since the xenomorphs are getting ever closer. Despite spotting a few xenomorphs climb aboard, he lies and says they're clear, afraid that if he told them the truth, they'd disconnect the cargo section both he and the xenomorphs were in and leave him there. Still, the ship manages to crash land on LV-223 with only a few bumps and bruises, though that soon becomes bodies and blood as the xenomorphs emerge from the cargo hold and attack. Retreating from the aliens and setting up camp elsewhere, the survivors quickly learn to avoid the area of the planet infected with the black goo. The life forms surrounding puddles of the stuff mutated, dangerous, and aggressive. Still, they locate enough food and clean water to survive for the time being. Our narrator is Russell, a terraforming engineer who watches as there's a power struggle between Kale and a greenhouse supervisor named Dione. Kale wants to return to the Onager and get the supplies and emergency transmitter they need, but Dione thinks it's too dangerous, that no one who went on such a mission would survive given their lack of weapons and the resilience of the xenomorphs. Russell, in the meantime, investigates the area and finds an old Weyland-Yutani mapping droid, one from the Prometheus expedition. It seems it's been here for 90 years, just recording and mapping as it needs to. Russell sets up his own little laboratory in a cave on a mountain, researching what he can about the black goo and its own use as a biological accelerant, making his theories about how, if it was properly filtered, it might even be some kind of healing agent. Mind you, as time goes on and more of the group are killed, his effectiveness as a narrator is called into question, especially when he nicknames the mapping droid Rover and talks to it as if it can respond to him. That's weird enough, but what's even weirder is what happens to some of the survivors. All are eventually killed, especially after Kale leads a doomed expedition into the Onager, now the home of a queen. But one man, Luis, ends up fused to one of the aliens thanks to an attack that leads them both into the black goo. And poor old Kale, doused in black goo himself, slowly mutates into a creature similar to the xenomorphs and kills Dione, unable to say anything else but sorry.
Well, at least he's a polite, hideous monstrosity.
Finally, Russell is the last survivor. For some reason, the xenomorph's refusing to approach the mountain he's made his home. He speculates that the mountain is alive, growing, and protecting him, though how accurate that is anyone's guess. One day, he strays a bit too far from the mountain and finds himself cornered by the xenomorphs, with his only option being to try the black goo. But instead, the xenomorphs empty out the red goo from his body.
So in this bit of irony, it's the aliens portion of the story that served as a prequel to the Prometheus portion. But will the next portion continue the story in the future? Well, my children, eventually we'll find out. I never drink web fluid, my children. We have seen some heroes go up against the Count a few times now. Doctor Strange, Batman. Perhaps it's time for a friendly neighborhood wall crawler to have his turn.
It seems his poor Aunt May is coming down with the flu, a new strain that is resistant to the medications prescribed. A new vaccine is being sent to the city to help with the epidemic that is spreading.
Although since vaccines are designed to help prevent someone from getting it and are not actually a cure, I'm not sure how that will be helpful.
But its creator is an eccentric who refuses to fly, taking a boat to New York to deliver the vaccine. The doctor suspects Aunt May won't survive by the time they arrive. He goes to the Fantastic Four, and in particular Johnny Storm, for help, hoping that they can get him transportation to the boat to get the vaccine. And indeed, he supplies it, a new Fantastic Four jet that allows him to speed to the ocean liner that the vaccine's creator, A.J. Maxfield, is traveling aboard.
So the story was about Dracula fighting him, wasn't it?
And indeed, Dracula arrives in bat form, seeking out Maxfield to kill him for his medications. Two men dressed as tin soldiers, because there is a masquerade, confront Dracula over clearly not belonging on the boat, and he hypnotizes them so they jump overboard to their doom. He claims another victim, a girl, for some blood, but Peter Parker soon finds the girl and takes her to the medical bay. Maxfield, being a doctor, is called in to look her over, but it seems Dracula and Peter are not the only ones looking for him, because a gangster storms in and takes Maxfield hostage for some boss of his. Spider-Man disposes of the gangster while Maxfield runs off, trying to find some help. The gangster's boss finds him first and tries to lure Maxfield away from the party, but Dracula spots them and pursues. The gangster stabs at Dracula to try to discourage him, but of course the Count is immune to such crude methods of death. No, instead the Lord of Darkness deals with the assassin and chucks Maxfield overboard. Right onto Spider-Man. He brings Maxfield back up, but still has to deal with another of the gangster's goons, who was hypnotized by Dracula to believe monsters were all around him. Spider-Man deals with him quickly, only to learn that the man he was helping was not Maxfield, but the ship's doctor. No, Maxfield was instead this blonde bombshell, who travels incognito since, well, let's face it, she attracts attention, especially when dressed up like a Viking. But Spidey explains the situation and gets her to New York. And Dracula flies off.
Dracula flies off, having never fought Spider-Man, in a book called Spider-Man vs. Dracula.
Apparently, the story was originally published in Giant Size Spider-Man #1, which was conceived of to cash in on the popularity of the Marvel Team-Up series. Fortunately, irritated as I am by the lack of fighting between the two, the creators wisely included two Comics Code vampire stories with it. First up, Vampire at the Window. A man named Reginald Rudley encounters a vampire floating outside his window one night, fleeing to a private eye for help. Instead of the police for some reason, he insists the detective come back with him to stop the vampire. While they don't believe him, they humor the man and indeed encounter the vampire. Rudley insists the detective do something, and he says he will, after the vampire finishes with him. After all, that vampire found him first, so he gets to drink his blood first. And then there's I Was a Vampire, wherein a bloodsucker named Cronin rises from his coffin to stalk a woman at night, with his very tiny bat wings on his back, but a policeman helps her on her way before he can strike. The longer he looks at her, the more he would like to be with her and not try to kill her. Knowing that he cannot be with her in his current state, he looks up a doctor who has claimed to have a cure for vampirism. Unfortunately, the doctor says he cannot provide it, since it takes 6 months to produce, and he only has so much of it at the moment. Desperate for the cure, Cronin kills him and downs the flask of serum, becoming human again. He quickly courts the woman, dating her for a few nights, before they quickly get married. However, when they go off to a resort by the sea, she reveals the truth about herself, that she is a vampire, and is not interested in the wine he has brought for the honeymoon.
While Spider-Man vs. Dracula was quite disappointing, the same cannot be said for the older vampire stories. And hey, at least in those ones, the vampires do indeed win. GoldenEye greetings, my children! Over several years, we have seen the zombie apocalypse spreading throughout the world of video games. And now it's time to put it to an end. Can there be a happy ending? Well, let's find out.
At AE Games, or Nice Games, or whatever the hell this studio is, the boss is berating a coder named Gina and her intern Freddy about the fact that their latest and greatest game, GoldenEye 008, isn't finished yet. Hell, they haven't coded the AI for one single enemy. He makes it clear that if they don't get busy finishing it off, they're fired! But how can they code all the enemies for such a buggy game in just one day? Well, fortunately, Freddy has a solution. The Office Fighter 2 cartridge from the last comic. Yes, it seemed he worked at GameStop while working off his college tuition and took that copy of the game when he left. All the Zombified game sprites have their AI already programmed in. Freddy figures somebody was using the cartridge to create a homebrew zombie game and just forgot about it, but they can steal the code, tweak it a bit, and use it for their Nintendo 64 game. And inside the game, the characters are happily preparing for their game to be finished. Obviously, there are still some holes in the code to be patched, but they're ready to begin combat training. And they get summoned for just such trials, arriving at an enemy warehouse where their first enemy appears, the beloved zombie who began this whole mess. They put some bullets in him, but he just gets right back up again, followed by all the other zombified sprites. It is of course another virtual bloodbath as all the zombies begin devouring the in-game sprites, with 008 himself confused about what sort of game this is when zombies are attacking spies. Zilla and Dee Dee show up, still disguised as zombies from the end of the last comic, and explain the situation to him. Fortunately, 008 has a plan. He is equipped with 3 bombs, and this level has 3 doomsday devices on it. If they plant the bombs and detonate the devices, it'll destroy all the zombies and a warp zone will open, allowing them to teleport away. Every normal sprite from the game will be returned to the headquarters zone, while the 2, as foreign data, will be transported to the hard drive cache, where they can easily change the file directories back to their own games. The plan is underway, and the 3 make their way to their assigned points, with 008 especially happy that the player characters have been given such ridiculous run speed that allows him to evade the zombies. At least until he's attacked by his boss and assistant from the game, who also have the same run speed. He is devoured before he can reach his bomb point, meaning the plan is doomed. Or is it? For while Dee and Zilla reach their respective points, our original zombie buddy finally gets to be the hero he wanted to be, taking the bomb to the doomsday device. And while in the programmer's office, the computer containing their data is fried, save for the memory backup of course, the zombies are stopped and Dee and Zilla are saved, saying their farewells as they re-enter their respective game franchises. And intern Freddy manages to rescue one of the sprites from the corrupted code. An 8-bit zombie!
Fret not for this ending, my children! The game world has been saved, and goodbyes are always sad, but I'm sure they'll be reunited with each other, and with Zombie, in Smash Brothers Ultimate or something. Mysterious morning, my children! Sometimes it's important to highlight the stories that are not necessarily horror-themed, but they appreciate the spooky nonetheless. As such, here's the Mystery Society.
Nick and Anastasia Mystery are rich, and they've decided to use their money to be globe-trotting super detectives, utilizing their skills and connections to investigate the paranormal. Their first major case brings Nick to Area 51, not to look for aliens, but for twin psychic girls named Nina and Sally, who have been held prisoner there for decades. Nick is devoted to not killing, and it certainly wouldn't look good to be murdering US Army personnel, though it takes a bit of convincing to get the girls to see it that way. More importantly though, if they're going to be a true society, then they need to recruit some people. Nina and Sally are certainly a start, but how about a dead lady going by the name Secret Skull? Like me, she is a ghoul!
Which means we have the same makeup artist!
And while psychic girls experimented on by the government is certainly interesting, what's more interesting, and certainly more up our coffin, my children, is that the skull of Edgar Allan Poe has been stolen. Before they can work on that, it seems the general in charge of Area 51 has been killed, and footage has been doctored to make it look like Nick did it. The Mystery Society must go on the run, in their fancy-pants UFO ship. But before they head out, they have one final member of their entourage join them. Jules Verne! aka Jules Verne's brain that has been put inside of a steampunk robot body. While Nick, Anastasia, Nina, and Sally work to clear their good names, Jules and the Secret Skull go to investigate the stolen remains of the good Mr. Poe. Percy, the son of the supposedly murdered general, has a bit of a kill boner for Nick, killing his own men even while seeking him out. They head back to Area 51 to see if they can find the original, undoctored footage. Nick is captured, which was their plan all along. He manages to sneak out of his cell to obtain the real footage, sending it out to Anastasia to see what she can do with it. Meanwhile, the bones and brains of the group meet with Charles Culprit, the head of the Poe Historical Society, who explains that there is a belief about the skull, that performing the right ritual can have the skull recite poems that Edgar Allan Poe wrote. Or, in fact, new ones from beyond the grave. Given his name and nervous disposition, the two soon follow Culprit, and indeed he is the one who stole it. They manage to fight off him and his army of ravens, the poor culprit falling into a deep pit for which he will never escape, allowing them to retrieve the skull. Meanwhile, Anastasia breaks into the Pentagon to speak with several high-ranking military personnel, showing them the original footage and proving that Nick was not responsible for the murder. To avoid embarrassment over all this, including the still-alive general who shot himself in the leg rather than show that he was defeated by two little girls, the Pentagon agrees to drop all charges and allow them to continue their operations. Although there can be no official relationship between the government and the Mystery Society. And that's fine, for after they deal with Percy with a bit of psychic fire, they have better things to do. Like listen to Edgar Allan Poe's skull recite the Raven.
Mystery Society was witty and fun, although I admit I'm more into it for the skulls and sorcery. All hail the tallest, my children! Well, you all demanded it, and I am a sucker when it comes to keeping you all happy. So, here's an issue of Invader Zim.
The truth is that really any issue of Invader Zim would be fine for the show given the subjects it tackles, but we're looking at this one because of the 2-page backup story. Okay, that's not enough for a glorious Longbox episode of Doom, but we'll settle for looking at the main story as well. Our would-be world conqueror Zim has a brilliant plan to finally take over this miserable planet. He just needs a robot pie oven, 7 million rubber gloves, and a space amoeba with a giant... well, something, because he doesn't quite finish that thought on account of his robot, Gur, having dug a well in the middle of the walk leading to his front door. But fret not, my children, his legs are broken! Wait... Anyway, over at the Membrane household, Dib's sister Gaz is preparing to go on a raid with her fellow gamers when she learns that Blotty's Pizza Hog is selling Blotty shorts featuring 16 pockets from which one can store pizza. Needing these shorts immediately, she abandons her fellow gamers to demand that the family go to Blotty's that night. Unfortunately, it's Dib's turn to pick the restaurant. And while normally Gaz would just threaten him, it seems that Dib has accidentally drunken some experimental nanosploder bots. So if he becomes depressed, his head will explode. As such, Gaz has to keep him happy for 12 hours, which means going with him on a quest for the legendary Squish Squatch, the unnatural hybrid of Sasquatch and something squishy. He must obtain evidence of Squish Squatch's existence to show up some commenter on the internet. Blackmailing her fellow gamers to assist her, Gaz arranges for one of them to be dressed up like Squish Squatch to keep Dib happy. But during the hunt, it seems the rest of her compatriots are dragged away by the legendary Fish Squatch. They find them, but it seems Fish Squatch has been taken by the equally legendary Ham Squatch. And after several more Squatches, including Horse Squatch, Waffle Squatch, and Bob Squatch, Gaz and Dib are trapped by Guac Squatch. Fortunately, with Gaz's strength, the two are able to escape from their avocado prison. And, in return for all her help, Dib agrees to go to Blotty's, where she acquires her Blotty shorts. Unfortunately for Dib, his camera was in photo mode, so he only got blurry photos of the various creatures and not the video proof he had wanted. Oh, and Zim is still stuck in the hole, but maybe he can escape if he throws his broken legs over his shoulders.
He does not escape that way.
And then, of course, there's our backup story, Ghost Aggressors. Dib travels to the miserable manor to try to find evidence of the ghosts that haunt its interiors, this time remembering to grab a video camera, and demands the ghosts show themselves. He bangs pots and pans, encourages them to possess a mouse or throw a cup at his head, when finally the ghost comes out. and tells him that he really needs to chill out and get a hobby, proceeding to smash his camera into pieces, an event that seems to keep happening to Dib whenever he tries this.
While this was an issue where Zim barely made an appearance, the truth is that we enjoy Invader Zim for all its wonderful characters, especially when it means we get to see Dib's endless failure. You know, my children, sometimes you really contemplate some deep thoughts and themes of horror works. What they say about society and the human condition. Other times, here's a shark that's also a dinosaur.
An archaeological site headed by a couple, Alice and Frankie, and their disobedient son discover the remains of a dinosaur that are perfectly preserved. They suspect there might even be some intact soft tissue beneath the spines they found. Unfortunately, things are disrupted a bit by the local extremist creationist, Reverend Peter Matthews. He thinks the dinosaur bones are fake science planted by the archaeologist and has gotten the city council to revoke their dig permits, primarily because it gets in the way of his Christian golf course, one that has 40 holes since it's themed around Noah's Ark. He's of course a bit of a bigot too, because the couple are lesbians, who are more than a little sick of him being such an asshole. However, the two that are actually getting along are the Reverend's daughter, Addie, and the two women's son, Evan. They make arrangements for a little romantic encounter later, while the archaeologists work to try to save their dig site lest they lose the find of a century. The Reverend returns to his golf course and encourages Addie to get together with Jason, a boy who works at the course, whom she has already slept with and recognizes him as a scumbag. Still, the Reverend is having other problems. A gopher problem at the course, but he has a guy on it, Jeremiah, who's enacting Operation Caddyshack on the gophers, filling their holes with propane and then igniting them. The Reverend encourages him to do so when the course is closed. That night, Addie and Evan meet at the 9th hole and share their insights about the cosmos and the world, hopeful that in the future there won't be as much strife between science and religion. And what better way to bring people together than with a giant monster, eh? Yes, it turns out the dinosaur they were digging up wasn't quite dead. It is a Sharkasaurus, as it is called, just in a dormant cycle, but now woken up and hungry. It goes on a rampage, eating several people on both sides and chewing off Jeremiah's legs, eventually finding itself at the protest to protect the dig site, and protects itself by killing many more innocents, including poor Frankie. Everyone retreats to the golf course, the central building being a large one they can protect, although Addie and Evan get stranded on one of the golf course's attraction, a Brontosaurus, because the Earth is 6,000 years old, you know. Jesus interacted with dinosaurs. And since the two are stuck up there, what else is there to do but have sex on top of it?
I mean, nothing gets my motor running faster than giant monsters killing people, but I didn't know that other people had that kink.
Both sides are equally disgusted by their children's behavior, but it is a moot point. The Sharkasaurus is still stalking them. Jeremiah comes up with a plan to kill the creature, using his own hidden arsenal of weapons. They send Jason out to get the lovebirds, armed with a gun, and he wants to leave Evan behind and only take Addie with him. In the ensuing struggle, though, Jason is accidentally shot, much to Evan's own personal horror. Bit of a moot point, though, since both end up getting eaten by the Sharkasaurus. With something now uniting the parents, they work together with Jeremiah to try to finally slay the beast, succeeding in barbecuing it at the cost of the Reverend's life. Or do they? In the wake of everything that has happened, the loss of so many lives, Alice is now working with Jeremiah and vows to kill the Sharkasaurus.
Death is an act of evolution. It's how we change, how the land changes, how the world changes. Time passes, but death, like evolution, is constant. So here's hoping this change is for the better. Play with your puppets, my children! We continue our look at the Action Lab's Puppet Master comics. While it is sad that the series is over, there are still more tales that I can share with you of murderous marionettes.
At the end of the last storyline, Anthony Gallagher left the children's hospital he had been staying at and joined the puppets at the Bodega Bay Inn as their new master. Upon spotting a photograph of his father, though, he wants to know why a picture of him is up. The Andre Toulon puppet gives a recap of the first movie and how Neil Gallagher attempted to gain immortality. It would seem that despite his apparent destruction at the end of the movie, he did indeed gain that immortality, since despite him officially dying in 1990, Anthony was born 10 years after that. But then, Anthony has psychic powers of his own, no doubt passed on from his father, that allows him to commune with the puppets and, well, be the puppet master. And we even see Neil's immortality in action, for at the end of the last story he shot himself, but now wakes up on the autopsy table, revealing that killing himself like that is a way for the demon Anapa to contact him. Speaking of Anapa, he has but a few tasks left for the puppets before their debt is repaid. Torch is a bookstore that has rare one-of-a-kind books inside of it, as well as rare one-of-a-kind book club members in the basement, though he is initially unaware of that. A psychic and con man are murdered by Tunneler on their way to a gig, when finally Blade and Pinhead must deal with a couple who have their own psychic abilities, seemingly prepared for an attack by the two. Although eventually they are overcome and killed, trying to give a warning to the puppets about Anapa before they are dead. With the deeds complete, certain artifacts they had obtained previously are given to the crazed driver of Anapa's henchmen, who immediately begins transforming. Yes, it seems that there was a real purpose behind the tasks given to them. All of the people they killed were descendants of the psychics who had banished Anapa and his forces from Earth. In all that time, their bloodlines maintained the spells and seals that would keep the demon from coming back to Earth, linked to their very lives. So how convenient then that the murders the puppets committed have now broken all those seals. And so the driver transforms into Anapa in all his upper torso heavy glory.
Probably a bad sign for a demon if you can defeat him by pushing him really hard in the chest so that he falls over.
Anapa reveals his designs, that he had been the one to direct them to the fortune teller from several storylines ago. He had been the one to create this elaborate scheme to put them back in their wooden bodies, but serving him, and he offers them one final chance to join him. And 6-shooter answers by putting a bullet in his massive chest. Anthony and the puppets fight off Anapa as best as they can, hiding from him, distracting him, basically doing anything to keep him from destroying them. Anapa has powers of his own, though, taking possession of all the tribute dolls that had been left at the Bodega Bay Inn by visitors, using them to track the puppets. Eventually, the puppets get the drop on him, but Anapa has been busy. He not only has the tribute dolls, but our old pal Camille, her body having been taken by the puppets at the end of the last storyline to keep her out of trouble. She also brings along a few more puppets that had been previously deactivated, Shredder Khan and 2 new puppets, Drac and Pajama Boy. Pajama Boy in particular has a funny way of killing people, climbing inside the mouth of the victim so they'll choke on him. Drac, conversely, has a much larger mouth than one would think. Toulon uses his power to summon a golem, a much larger puppet that can fight off Anapa, though it too eventually falls. Anthony, though, figures out how to end Anapa. Destroy the tribute dolls! Anapa used his own life force to animate them, meaning his power is equally inside of those dolls. Thus they destroy as many as they can, weakening Anapa enough for Anthony to shove Tunneler right into Anapa's head. And while things end happily for Anthony and the puppets, the same can't be said for the poor drivers who come across a still-living Camille on the road.
So it seems things are going to work out now for the puppets and their master. no longer beholden to an evil demon after all. Or are they? Elementary, my dear children! A phrase that Sherlock Holmes never actually said in the books, but who cares? We're more interested in the murder and the ghosts and all that.
The Hound of the Baskervilles was the first Sherlock Holmes novel that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote after he killed off Holmes,
making this the first story where Sherlock is a zombie.
Holmes and Watson are approached by Dr. Mortimer, a friend of the late Sir Charles Baskerville. Baskerville himself has died recently due to a heart attack, but there are mysterious circumstances surrounding his death. Namely that he died with an expression of pure terror on his face, and the paw prints of a large dog nearby. The whole thing traces back to a curse on the Baskerville family from back in the 1700s, when Hugo Baskerville abducted a woman, and upon the woman fleeing, swore his soul to the devil to take her. And the devil answered by sending a devil dog to murder him.
The devil takes a very dim view of kidnapping, my children.
Dr. Mortimer is worried that the curse may also fall upon the heir to the family fortune, Henry, Sir Charles's nephew. Charles had two brothers, one that fathered Henry, and the other believed to be dead in South America without any kids to his name. Henry has already sent a warning note to stay away from Baskerville Hall, but he intends to take it. Probably because he can't really stay in London. Someone keeps stealing his shoes. Holmes says he has pressing business and can't investigate things right away, but dispatches Dr. Watson to stay with Henry to keep him safe and look into this matter. But it seems the ghostly canine is not the only intrigue in the area, for a local criminal has escaped and is roaming the moors. While there, Watson meets the caretakers of the Baskerville estate, Mr. and Mrs. Barrymore. They might have a motive to kill Sir Charles and Sir Henry, since their inheritance is a mere pittance compared to what Henry receives. But he also meets Mr. Stapleton, a naturalist, and his sister, who warns Watson away when she mistakenly thinks she's talking to Henry. During the investigation, Watson discovers that the escaped criminal is none other than Mrs. Barrymore's brother. She has been secretly helping him, providing him with food and old clothes, on plans to let him escape to South America. A plan that Watson and Henry are actually too happy to let go through. Less burden on the British taxpayers, after all. And after all, it's not like he's dangerous. Like when Watson and Henry see him on the dark, gloomy moors and he throws a rock on them or anything. In any case, Holmes soon arrives and we discover that he's actually been here the whole time. He's been investigating on his own, not wanting to tip anyone off that he was there secretly, and his secret plans have yielded something interesting. Miss Stapleton is not his sister, but his wife. She too is a reluctant pawn in this murderous game. Looking into things further, Holmes discovers that Stapleton is, in fact, the son of the brother believed dead in South America. They come up with a plan to catch Stapleton in the act, following an unknowing Henry home from dinner at the Stapleton house, only barely reaching him in time because of the thick fog that falls upon the moors. And Henry is indeed attacked by a ghostly wolf. Or rather, a dog painted in phosphorus to give it an eerie glow. Holmes pursues Stapleton and, after a struggle, he ends up falling into a bog and sinks, refusing an offer of help from Holmes. He'd rather die than be in prison. So I guess no more burden on the British taxpayers at all then.
Although personally, I'd like to think he still ended up a prisoner in hell. And trust me, Satan doesn't like it when you try to misuse a devil dog. Pre-order your tickets, my children! Yes, I can see how sometimes you may want to vary your media up a bit when it comes to horror. You don't just want horror comics, my children. So why don't we take in a show at the Theatre?
The Theatre is an anthology miniseries, each issue containing a different story. but the framing device is at a movie theater. Each story is a movie being shown to many different members of the viewing public. Although don't assume that the audience isn't in on the action a bit.
And this, my children, is why 3D is not the best form of immersion. But having actual murder at the movie theater is.
The first story, The Change, takes place as a couple sits down to watch it alone in the theater. The Change is the story of a zombie apocalypse. Or rather, what happens when the zombie apocalypse is over. Yes, a man and his son, David, have survived the zombie apocalypse as the military has finished sweeping the area and eradicating the zombies. Life moves on after such a difficult time, but it does change. Less television, less money, but ultimately people are okay and survive. But the thing about zombies is that sometimes you don't get them all. One zombie wanders a bit too near to David and his father and manages to bite the poor old man. The two do their best to try to treat it, to fight off the infection, but ultimately the father must be tied up and David resists his father's final instructions to kill him should he turn. He can't bring himself to do it until he reads the final message from his father, and he works up the courage, only to find out that he has escaped from his bonds, and it would seem the whole disaster will start again. The couple leaves the theater, arguing the merits of the story, not realizing that they are the lucky ones, since all the rest of the audience has been slaughtered. From there, it's on to Memoirs of a Serial Writer, as the theater owner's daughter prepares a gala premiere of this new film, which happens to feature her own sister in it. It is the story of a writer trying to break in and keep themselves on the bestsellers list. But other famous authors keep bumping their new book off the list. So he, or is it she, keeps bumping them off too. The story puts you into the perspective that a writer can be anyone, look like anybody, and of course when there are pen names involved, who can say who this anonymous writer really is, or what they look like? Well, you might want to ask the police officer investigating, but that's not important. What is important is that the theater owner's daughter pulled it off. The theater is paid and in the black for a while. Won't their shriveled up corpse of an owner be so proud of his daughters? Next we have The Hole. Two new employees at the theater decide to mess around with each other during a screening of this film, which is about a sad man who is being divorced by his attractive but very aggressive shrew of a wife who was more than happy to cheat on him at every opportunity. One night, the man notices a hole in his ceiling. A hole that seems to lead to nowhere. He tries to plaster it over, but it just grows larger. He can't find the other side of the hole in the attic and tests sending objects into it. Tennis balls, a flashlight, a cat, and they all disappear, never to return. So you can imagine how, after all the things his wife puts him through, especially since she plans to take the house in the divorce and leave him with nowhere to go, that he decides to send her into the hole too. Unfortunately for him, his loving daughter stops by and decides to take a look at it too, and he never sees her again. He thinks he's just delusional, especially when the hole opens up into the attic later, but his therapist soon notices a strange hole in her own desk. As for our happy couple at the theater, well, one of the other employees stops by to give them their pink, or rather red, slips. Then we have Down the Street, as the theater's projectionist tells someone with him about his dreams of writing for movies. After all, he watches them all day. Like this one, of course. A pair of friends murder their neighbor one night, burying him in a grave. One friend, Ricky, is all too happy about it and goes home to have sex with his wife, while the other, Danny, is considerably more conflicted about the whole thing, as he becomes more and more consumed with guilt and terror over what he's done. We learn why they murdered him. Seems he was a registered sex offender, a fact that he never shared with the two, even when they became friends with him, let him hang out with their children even. Taking some preemptive steps, they decided to murder him. But Danny is becoming unraveled and decides to tell the police what they did. Ricky, obsessed with keeping the secret, tries to murder him first. But it seems Danny had a different solution in mind. He did confess, but he left a note for his wife and went on his merry way, letting Ricky take the fall while he started a new life elsewhere. As for our projectionist, well, he thought the story was garbage and would like the opinion of the two people who he has tied up, one of whom is already dead. Which brings us to our final story, Forget-Me-Not. A man investigates all the missing people from the previous story, the leads all going back to the old run-down theater. He eventually makes his way to watch a screening of this new film. This is a story about a man with an average life with average activities that haven't changed in 10 years. Except as the day goes on, no one seems to know who he is. Longtime co-workers and bosses have no memory of him working there. He's thrown out of his apartment by his landlady. Even his mother and brother eventually have no idea who he is. An ex-girlfriend is the only one whom he can convince that he has known her. But even she struggles to remember as they spend more time together. And eventually, they track down the truth, that he actually discovered his wife having an affair with his best friend and murdered the two. And was so distraught over the whole thing that he made himself forget her and what he had done. And then, after killing his ex-girlfriend to keep it secret once more, well, it seems this whole thing was a result of his wife's ghost, who makes sure that once again, everyone forgets him. And he forgets even himself over time. The investigator at the theater, a police officer, goes home that night after finding nothing. But since he plans on bringing in people to do a more thorough search later, the aforementioned theater owner's daughter takes matters into her own hands. With the officer gone, the theater is raided, but the police find nothing. But the crew of the theater have already arrived at their next destination, securing funding to take the theater chain nationwide.
I hope you've enjoyed this little matinee, my children. Just repeat to yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. Welcome back, boils and ghouls, aka my children. In 2016, the company Super Genius Comics dug up the corpse of our beloved Tales from the Crypt for 2 issues. And hey, now we're digging it up again so I can present it to you.
And when resurrecting a book like Tales from the Crypt, obviously you need some sort of framing device on how that happens, which of course occurs in the brief but silent Stakeout, where a man resembling a certain, well, let's just say he goes by the name Freddy, goes to stake some vampires. While he succeeds once, you can't keep our hosts down. The Crypt Keeper, the Vault Keeper, and the Old Witch always get up again in the tomb of EC Comics. Our true first story is Divestment, featuring a greedy old man named Brent Angleton. He's a trillionaire who has kept himself alive by buying the organs of the young, usually cheating them out of most of their money, as is the case with this poor mother, who sells off her kidneys and he promises to only give her children less than 10% of what he promised. 10 years later, he's still at it, slaughtering a large group of protesters who attack his home, wanting him to divest his earnings in the wake of several scandals. His company hires a new PR woman who has a plan to fake all the divestments to get public attention off of him. But Brent doesn't realize that, being the daughter of the woman he killed at the start, her plan is for him to divest a lot more than that. Second up is Zombie Bank, about a man heavily abused by zombies in this post-apocalyptic world. It seems even after everything happened, the world just continued on. Only everyone was made into a zombie. The only person who didn't bully him, and was still alive, was the boss's secretary. But when he finds her getting bitten by their boss, he realizes he must put an end to this monstrous world by killing his zombie boss. How strange then, that after he kills the boss, they all stop being zombies, and no one remembers being a zombie, and all they do remember is that he's a murderous freak. The Werewolf of Wall Street brings us to detectives Wayland and Branch, investigating the murders of several greedy partners in a firm, the last of whom believes his own private security company will do better in finding the killer than them. Wayland is more than happy to wash his hands of the whole affair. Such people deserve their fate, and when that same man is found dead, Wayland can only shrug and figure that it's the end of it. Brand becomes suspicious of such a thought and begins investigating Wayland after he retires, learning of her partner's squalid conditions, even having to eat dog food, and finds her proof that he is indeed the murderer. Or rather, his more bestial form is. While she manages to put him down without silver bullets, she does wonder how he became a werewolf. And the answer lies in the dog food he was eating, filled by a company owned by the firm that moved to Russia, on some special ingredients added by the Vault Keeper. Next up is Picture Perfect, about some high school girls taking photos of themselves in a gym. When one mean girl takes a photo of another girl's ass in her panties and uploads it online, where it becomes an instant viral meme.
I guess there aren't that many pictures of butts on the internet.
They can't prove she was the one who did it, and she brags about insulting her online to all her friends. But then on her way home while drunk, she runs a guy over. Wanting to protect herself, this mean girl tosses the body into a nearby bay, only to find the next day that every picture coming out of her victim's camera is pictures of the girl's late-night hit and run. We move on to Undertow, about a woman whose daughter supposedly drowns from the undertow at the beach, yet she can still hear her daughter's voice pleading with her. When a friend comes by to offer her some wine as condolences, though, she finds out that the voice is very real and very abused. Mommy Dearest has apparently kept her daughter quite alive, though just barely, and continually punishing her for not keeping things clean. Fortunately, the friend calls the police, and Mommy Dearest finds herself having to clean up after her cellmate. Moving on, we have Feed It, where a man and his hunchbacked assistant have been keeping a monster locked up in a decrepit castle with the intention of selling it to a circus. The problem is that they have to keep feeding it live bodies, but now they've been found out by the local village. And what's worse, the hunchback accidentally kills their latest victim while they drag them down to the basement. So of course he quickly disables the hunchback and shoves him in to be eaten by the monster, but doesn't watch his footing properly, slipping on the hunchback's blood and paralyzing his back. He cannot escape, but just watch in horror as the monster, a giant snake, digests its latest victim. And once that digestion is complete, it will slide through the bars for its next meal, him. And our final tale is Leather or Not, about a fashion mogul and his scarred assistant. They have been working for some time on a magnificent style of clothing that relies on only the softest material they can find, human skin. They murder those who would visit the mogul and his palatial estate and skin them to make fabulous clothing. But one time, the mogul makes it clear to his scarred companion how much he loathes his appearance and his advances on him. And so the assistant decides to make things out on his own, with a new outfit made from his employer.
Tales from the Crypt, even when made nowadays, always manages to sew together such glorious stories, my children. And just like that last tale, they always use the right amount of dye. Masked morning, my children. The nice thing about the Batman is that with Elseworlds, he fills into so many other horror creatures. We've seen him as a vampire, as Frankenstein's monster. So how about the Phantom of the Opera next?
Well, to be accurate, he shares the role with another whom we'll get to. It is the turn of the century in Gotham City, and Bruce Wayne is indeed Batman, summoned by Commissioner Gordon via the bat signal to hunt criminals. But what he also has is an appreciation for the opera. And he's not the only one, as inside the opera there is a performance of Mask of the Red Death with the leading lady, Juliana Sandoval, and her male counterpart, Harvey Dent. And yet, while she gets flowers from adoring fans, her understudy, Laura Avian, gets quite a bouquet of her own from a secret admirer. One night, Batman chases a hoodlum into the opera and onto the stage. While that is an entertaining show in its own right, the party really gets started when a fire accidentally breaks out and lights Harvey's cape on fire, soon spreading up to his face. Later, Bruce manages to meet Laura himself and woos her, even suggesting that maybe they can be helpful to the poor, scarred Harvey Dent. After all, while he feels he can no longer dance as he once did because of his disfigurement, perhaps he could teach dancing. Unfortunately, Harvey does not take to the idea, wanting neither their pity nor the gawking from anyone who had come not to learn, but to stare at his scars. As Laura continues to get flowers from her admirer, accidents begin to plague the production. Miss Sandoval gets injured by a hand opening a trapdoor beneath her, and the theater manager wants to shut down the production despite the presence of understudies like Laura. But his tune changes. Well, it ends altogether anyway, when he is murdered for his refusal. As Laura begins to study her part in more detail, a certain scarred individual arrives to teach her to surrender her normal self and give in to the dance, but soon flees out of fear of his own appearance. Although Laura does note a certain mysterious night watchman standing guard in the rafters. Another accident almost befalls the production as Laura is assaulted by common crooks, but they are brought down by her night watchman, the Batman. Fainting from the excitement, the Batman takes her back to the cave. She does not fear what he might have behind his mask, for she is only concerned with his heart, knowing that he is Bruce Wayne. However, Batman himself fears his own mask, the darkness that lies within him. He tries to make her afraid too, knowing that the attack on Sandoval and the manager were no mere accidents, but she fears not when her guardian angel watches from on high. The night of the performance comes, and it seems the regular dance partner in the mask has decided to hang back, as it were, and replaced with the Phantom, who taught Laura her dancing. Batman finds the murdered man and attacks the Phantom on stage, who says Batman can't provide her anything but a cold palace for a prison. Removing the mask, the Phantom is, of course, Harvey Dent, her long secret admirer from afar. He'd rather she be dead than not with him, so he tries to kill her, and himself, with a falling chandelier. But Batman saves her in the end. But the real end is that Batman realizes that the Phantom was correct. She belongs in a world of lights on stages, while he belongs forever to the dark.
Hopefully, my children, we never have to see Andrew Lloyd Webber penning Batman Never Dies. It's the night he came home again, my children! We have not talked about the Halloween franchise before, which is certainly an error on my part. It's the name of the season, after all. So let's take a look at a critically acclaimed Halloween story, shall we?
Make no attempt to fit this into any particular part of the franchise. The only thing to remember is that Michael Myers is still alive, still stalking, but he's moved on from Haddonfield and is instead settling into a new life in Russellville, Illinois.
And yet somehow it is still filmed in California.
This is Lisa, a girl who is afraid to step out into the night thanks to a traumatic incident she once had a few years ago. She had been babysitting a boy named Daniel, and one time they ran off into the woods to play. She forgot to alert the boy's family where they'd be, and they came across a cabin, the child running inside. She chased after him, but something occurred during that time, and she found him bleeding in a cellar. When she was down in that cellar, she looked up at the stairwell and saw a shape in silhouette that closed the cellar door and kept them trapped for 2 days. Both were traumatized, though in Daniel's case, he now sends Lisa regular crayon drawings, but the latest batch contained a few disturbing ones. Meanwhile, husband and wife Ryan and Marcy decide to head to Russellville to check in on Marcy's parents. Usually they would be nagging her on a daily basis, but they have been strangely quiet for some time now. Along the way, they accidentally hit a girl fleeing from Michael Myers and his cabin, the only survivor of a few others who had been slaughtered by him. Marcy is stabbed and taken by Michael, Ryan only surviving with some head trauma and other injuries. He manages to take the injured girl to a hospital and is interviewed by the police. They are suspicious. They know of Michael Myers and are terrified of the possibility that he might be around. But on the other hand, maybe Ryan is the real perpetrator. After all, there's no evidence that his wife was with him, so how can they be sure? He runs off to find his wife, eventually running into Lisa, whose friends have been slowly killed off one by the good Mr. Myers. Nor are they not easy deaths either. One friend is captured by him, and we see things from Michael's point of view while he stuffs an apple in her mouth, her just praying for salvation after breaking her parents' curfew. And all Michael sees is a clown that he is stabbing. Michael is very busy when he finally catches up to Lisa, hanging up some of his own crayon artwork on her wall. Images of stabbing and pumpkins and one crossed-off image of Dr. Loomis with the word "No" written over it. Does that mean he should not kill him? Perhaps his sense of life and death, good and evil, is not as rudimentary as one might think.
Or, he's insane and his logic only makes sense to him. That works too.
Ryan and Lisa meet up at the home of Daniel's family, who just happens to also be Marcy's family. Sadly, they're all dead by now, victims of Michael. Unseen by Lisa is a picture of her amongst them, with the name of Michael's murdered sister Judith written under it. Ryan drags Lisa along on the hunt for his wife, knowing that Michael is after her. Unfortunately, when they confront Michael in his cabin lair, it seems she is already dead. But hey, Ryan soon joins her in the afterlife. Thanks mainly to Michael putting one of his spare masks on him and shoving him outside into a bunch of waiting police, whom of course assume that he is Michael and open fire. And Lisa? Sadly, she is never found, buried alive by Michael on a grave he dug for her, the name Judith Myers hanging over it. While I provide merely a summary of these events, my children, I cannot overstate how poetic this story is. Talk of wanting to live, of seeing the suffering of life as a force of evil stalks and kills them, of Lisa's desire to dance in starlight, and that dream being snuffed out. Perhaps it could have even been avoided if Ryan hadn't dragged her along. But in the end, Ryan was right about one thing. We can't just be the playthings of demons. We have to be able to fight them, to save ourselves and the people we care about. Because if our future has been planned by monsters, or even seen by them, then death truly is all we'll ever have. And the fragments of life that we cling to in between will just be a sick, sick joke.
But not for me, my children. Personally speaking, things got way more fun for me after I died. Mysterious morning, my children! While I talk about the cape and costume crowd interacting with our beloved horror realm a lot, it's important to remember that those occurrences are the exception rather than the rule.
Which is why, when you find the time when Superman, of all people, gets to fly around the House of Mystery, well, you've got to share it with the entire world. It's Halloween night, and trick-or-treaters are, of course, making their way around Metropolis, starting with this little boy who's dressed as Superman. And after he gets his candy, finds himself transformed into the Man of Steel. Meanwhile, at a Halloween party hosted by Lois Lane, Clark Kent is dressed up as the Green Lantern and suffers some abuse from some of his co-workers. At least until Superman, aka the transformed child, shows up and says he needs to get Lois out of there for her own safety. Even Jimmy Olsen gets transformed into Thor.
So does that mean Jimmy is going to get his eye ripped out and his entire planet destroyed too?
After the fake Superman takes Lois away, Superman makes it look like whatever magic transformed them also made him into a Green Lantern, so he pursues, although he is slowed by some magically altered birds. Meanwhile, in the House of Mystery itself, Kane is entertaining a group of children with stories of ghosts and devils and imps, when who should show up but another imp, Mixie Spitlick. Unlike everyone else, Kane has problems pronouncing his name. Mixie Spitlick has decided to play a little trick-or-treat on Superman, and he's taking over the House of Mystery to do so, changing the children into ghosts and werewolves and goblins.
Which, while an entertaining idea, my children, I can't really get behind. You should be enjoying the monsters, not being the monsters.
Once Superman arrives at the House of Mystery, he is warned that he has to rescue Lois before midnight, the witching hour, or some terrible fate shall befall her. Superman makes his way through our little mansion of mystery, confronting a monster with multiple tentacles, a room where the gravity inverts, and even a glowing skeleton, whom he almost hurts until he realizes it's a transformed child. He then enters the room of secret fears, where his secret identity is out in the open. Lois is dead, and soon the rest of the Daily Planet staff are attacked by gangsters, who are apparently more upset over an expose he wrote and not that he's freaking Superman.
Superman's fears have a weird plot point.
He then encounters a vampire! It's of course another child, but fortunately he's more careful this time, utilizing a bright light to change the child back to normal. Eventually, the clock runs out and Superman is foiled. But of course it's Mixie Spitlick. He just wanted to play a prank. It's not like Lois was in any real danger. Still though, he wants to keep the tricks going for a while. But a child under Kane's care has an idea, getting Mixie Spitlick to say his name backwards through correcting him on his name's pronunciation, saving the day and ending Halloween with some treats.
Isn't it so nice, my children, that on Halloween, it's you who are the hero? Or the villain, depending on how you want to dress up. Mummy morning to you, my children! And once again, it is time to honor the least appreciated classic monster, the mummy. And the way to get you kids into it is something made for you kids.
Wrapped Up is a series of short stories featuring Milo, a mummy child with his mummy parents, whom are divorced as his mummy is dating an adventurer, while daddy mummy is less successful in life, living his normal life as a mummy. You know, all the normal stuff a kid has to deal with. His insane wizard neighbor, creepy dolls, evil cats, all of that boring stuff. Since there are so many stories within the first volume, I'll just spotlight a few stories in particular that I've grown fond of while reading. There is, of course, the Babysitter's Flub, where Milo's dad is going out on a date and he has to be babysat. But this babysitter, a witch, is younger and less experienced than him. But that's okay, she's determined to show him that she can be good at this. First, he'd like some chocolate milk. So she conjures up a chocolate cow, who proceeds to poop all over the living room after eating his father's laptop. Next, he'd like a pizza for dinner. Unfortunately, they have a frozen one ready. But wait, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to cook? Who has time for that? No, better use magic to deal with that time, and thus create an angry pizza monster who wants to free all the food. After all that chaos is past, the pizza and the cow make their escape into the city just as Dad gets home. And he notices none of the damage to the house because his date went badly. Then, of course, there is the aforementioned evil cats in Killer Cats and Mummy Wraps. Milo's neighbor, a demented wizard, breaks into his room to inform him how he's being chased by the feline fanatics. The cats breaking in after them and getting into the wizard's beard. They can't hurt the little things, they're too adorable, and so they must go on the run, luring them away at times with tuna and being followed because the kitties are capable of skateboarding. Eventually, they manage to reach a rooftop away from the cats, but are basically trapped there. The situation is made no better when all the cats fuse together into a giant kaiju cat. Fortunately though, Milo knows some good boys who are more than capable of spritzing some water at the cats to make them go away, totally solving the problem forever. Speaking of kaiju, there's always hungry kaiju. Milo and his sister Jill are on their way to a field trip on the bus when things start going haywire. No phone signal, lots of stomping, giant hungry monster outside, that kind of thing. Hungry is the right word for it. The kaiju is desperate to sink its teeth into some food, chasing after the bus so it can make a snack out of all the kids. Fortunately, Milo is on top of things, getting the kids to discard their lunches at the beast to try to soothe its appetite, though of course it's not enough. Fortunately, they also happen to be passing by a pizza truck full of food to be delivered, and Milo leaps over to it, risking himself by tossing out pizza after pizza to the ravenous creature until it's finally too full to chase them anymore. Milo even gets a hug from a cute girl in class for his bravery and quick thinking. Ooh, scandalous. Though Milo faints because of that, which probably does not help his bravery image.
There are more stories throughout. Jill hanging out with vampires, what happens to unwanted Halloween candy, that sort of thing. But I think you kids will enjoy them more when you get yourselves wrapped up in the series. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood, my children! Like yesterday, here's another one for you little ones. Although, considering what decade it's from, truly, it's for the child in most of us.
Ren and Stimpy, the classic Nicktoon full of inappropriate humor and innuendos and other such things that make it perfect for a show like this. There are two stories inside of it, one more appropriate for our purposes, and one only tangentially related, which is where we'll begin. Breakfast of Idiots. Ren has woken up and wants to get ready for work, Stimpy preparing breakfast for him. But Ren only wants coffee. Oh, but it seems they're all out of it. But when Ren insists, Stimpy whips up some coffee from their cactus dirt. And of course, Ren loves that crunchy taste.
I can relate, my children. Considering my current status, I too am eating dirt.
Some toxic waste disposalists are traveling through the neighborhood and trying to get rid of their last vat of the stuff, since their regular site refused their final load. They decide to leave it in front of our hero's house, which Stimpy mistakes for syrup that he ordered. Putting it together with his pancakes, Stimpy mutates so that he becomes an over-muscled behemoth. Ren quickly deduces the same can happen to him. And indeed, after a dunk in the sludge, he too has been transformed from Hoenn to Hulk. He quickly gets aspirations to take over the world. And Stimpy, like any badly proportioned member of the cape and costume crowd, tries to stop him. But the effects soon wear off, and the remaining radioactive waste was knocked over, leaving them to their original shapes. At least until the next load comes, and Ren consumes enough to become kaiju-sized. But what we're really interested in, my children, is The Legend of Sleazy Hollow, wherein Ichabod Wren and Aloysius von Stimpy have arrived in a quaint little town to become the new school teachers. It's such a small place that it's a one-horse town. Quite literally. There's only one horse in the town, whom all the townspeople desperately want to ride. An old man tells them why that is. The Horseless Headsman. He is a ghost who chops off the heads of anyone riding a horse, so now they only go around with the single horse. Though it also seems the headsman is starting to go after people who aren't on horses.
Well, if it makes no difference, then why just the one horse?
Wren doesn't believe in the story, but when he and his teachings are mocked by the school children, they decide to prove to the town that the ghost isn't real by having Wren ride on Stimpy's back like a horse. But then the headsman attacks, and in the confusion, Wren is knocked off of Stimpy. And in his dazed state, he gets onto the back of the headsman as his new steed. And it's soon revealed that the headsman is just as worthy of being such a steed, because it's actually the single horse from the town. He's being run ragged and has been trying to thin out the riders.
Nobody mentions that the story says that he was killing the riders, so this is actually a murderous horse. Yes, sir, I actually like that.
Fortunately, there is a solution thanks to our heroes. Stimpy enjoyed being ridden so much that he can take over the duties for a bit, because cats are well known for how effective they are at being ridden by full-sized humans.
That's it for this one, my children, and I can truly say it's better than bad. It's good. Special salutations, my children! When we talk about the cape and costume crowd, it's usually for characters who have a rare encounter with the darker side of things. But how about checking it out when they just flat out celebrate Halloween?
It is of course an anthology full of stories, some only a page long, others much longer. Bookending it is Bizarro, wherein his upside-down version of Halloween sees him going door to door giving out fruit to the citizens of Bizarro World, following up by cleaning their houses. But then there's Guy Gardner, who always wants to throw a Halloween party at his bar, be it on Earth or on Oa. Sure, most of the aliens of the Green Lantern Corps don't celebrate Halloween, but like that'll stop them from coming by to put on a costume and drink some beer. Halloween is a special time for him, and he wants to share it with the woman he loves, Ice. But she's already promised to go to Fire's Halloween party. But why is it so special to Guy? Well, if anything, it's more that he does it to spite his dead father, who was abusive to him, and clearly did not care for his child's love of the holiday. But hey, even if past memories are bad, there are always good ones to be made. Like when Ice shows up to the party to reveal she was always going to come. As well as showing off that even in space, they make ridiculous sexy versions of costumes. While the Creeper finds out what creeps him out during this season, the version of the Outsiders from that time period gather to deal with the cult of the Red Moon, a group of vampires that seek to resurrect their queen from the dead. Normally, Batman would stop them, but he is rather, well, dead when this comic took place.
But not a zombie or Black Lantern or anything else undead, just dead. How common.
The Outsiders make their way through the cult's castle, Black Lightning and Geoforce dealing with the Frankenstein-esque familiars that serve as their guards, while the rest stop the cult's ritual. Or do they? For a certain woman appears out of fog and finishes the ritual herself, resurrecting, much to his frustration, Andrew Bennett, aka I-Vampire. While Batman was dead at the time, there's always room for a story of Halloween past, like the annual Wayne Foundation Halloween Charity Ball. Unfortunately, the party is crashed by Killer Moth, there to rob the rich. But fortunately, he's stopped by a pair of trick-or-treaters, namely Batgirl and Robin, dressed up as Batman and Superman. Speaking of Robin, a tale of then modern times sees Damian Wayne dealing with a villain on Halloween by the name of Sugartooth. He was formerly a dentist until the Joker murdered his daughters, permanently giving them a rictus grin. Ha, rictus. Driven mad by what happened, Sugartooth swore to rid the world of smiles, and he's got a little girl hostage, ready to mutilate her to keep her from ever smiling again. Fortunately, little Damian is able to rescue her and put Sugartooth right in jail, where everyone is smiling.
As I've said, my children, it's the smiles that keep us going, don't you think?
Next up is a sad little story about another Robin, Tim Drake, dealing with the loss of yet another father figure during Dia de Muertos on their one-pager about the spooky one-eyed lady who lives down the lane. But more importantly is a little tale of Bloody Mary, and another villain who lives in the mirror. Yes, Mirror Master is holding some children hostage before they can finish playing Bloody Mary, having noticed the ghostly woman in the mirrors while traveling through them. Fortunately, Kid Flash is nearby to shatter her aspirations of stealing the children away for herself. But the same can't be said for Mirror Master, who probably should think of a new title for himself. And after Beast Boy proves that one is never too old to go trick-or-treating, Wonder Woman hangs out with the girls of the Teen Titans as they watch a Blair Witch-esque horror story, Wonder Woman not believing that the found footage is real, but then follows the teens when they go off looking for proof. Of course, they just end up playing in the water, fortunately not encountering the shadow that watches them all depart. And after a decidedly un-Halloween-y story until the ending about the Flash and Superman having a race, the actual Superman helps out Lois with the Daily Planet's haunted tour. He plays the Grim Reaper, whom legend says stalks the halls of the Daily Planet, searching for victims, since Metropolis is so safe thanks to Superman that he has failed to take so many. But of course it's just to scare off some punks. And it's certainly not that there's a real Grim Reaper moving through the halls. Or was there? But hey, even if that wasn't the real Grim Reaper, it was still probably a better office Halloween party than the one Bizarro throws.
It's always nice when the cape and costume crowd recognizes the best time of year and has some fun of their own to share with you, my children. There's something in the fog, my children. Today's story is a companion piece, both to John Carpenter's original film and the 2005 remake. This is the story behind The Fog.
In 1871, Chinese traders and laborers are working on an island in America. However, they see the fog beginning to roll in and they recognize it. The fog brings with it a curse that originated in China, but has followed them here after 14 years. The first signs that the curse is hitting the populace come in the form of boils on people's skin. First claiming Francis Blake, the brother of the wealthy Richard Blake, who owns all the mining operations on the island. Francis Blake is the kind of guy we like around here, my children. Namely, he's a murderer obsessed with fire. He claims the marks on his hand are just a result of an accident that occurred when he lit a fireplace. But later we see that fireplaces are not the only things he is setting ablaze. The poor deep-roasted corpse was Yang Li, husband to Yu Lian, who has been going around the island searching for her missing husband. Although she eventually realizes he will never be coming home when she spots his ghost walking the deck of the ship they call home. When a message from spirits warn the Chinese to give evil, a warning meaning to pass the curse on to others, it is clear that they must leave the island and hope to once more outrun the fog. Their leader, Yang's father, talks to Richard and explains about the curse and some of its origins. It concerns a traveling monk named Yi Qi who once went to a temple and carried the curse with him to that temple. All the monks there starved to death, emaciated beyond belief, even though they ate with such greed. Yi Qi was soon barred from entering other temples, but it did not stop the curse from claiming another temple he briefly tried to enter. Most of the temple died off, but the descendants tried to make a new life for themselves. Each time, the fog followed them and claimed more victims. Eventually, most people wouldn't trade with them for fear of carrying the curse with them. So they came to America and found peace for the last 14 years. But it's over now. Blake, of course, does not believe in their curse, content to not listen about the growing amount of strange marks on people, of animals staring out at the sea and leaping into it before the fog can claim them. The traders are leaving, hoping that they'll get out before anything worse happens to the island. But it's clearly too late. Children are infected, people are growing more agitated, more restless. The curse drives them mad, filled with unfocused aggression. The affliction didn't just burn their flesh, but at their minds too. People in the streets begin attacking one another, Blake barely able to stop them. But mentioning the curse that young Lee's father had explained just makes another violent madman kill said father with a gun. Their very souls were tainted by the curse now. The madness kept on spreading as people began to hack away at their own decaying flesh, either ripping it off or trying to cut out the afflicted sections with knives. Others simply had their flesh melt away, like poor Frances, as Julianne leads her people away from the doomed island, having successfully, although unintentionally, passing the curse off to the island. Richard Blake makes plans of his own to try to save what's left after a year, convinced that it was not the people who were cursed, but the island. He has purchased a ship and named it after his beloved wife, the Elizabeth Dane, and plans to take the people away someplace safe and away from this terrible island. And I'm sure that this will just go splendidly.
Remember, my children, always carry a light with you when you peer out at the sea. You never know what may lie in the fog. It might even be your doom. Creepy greetings, my children. Last year, we took a break from talking about it, but it's back again. The finest in illustrated horror. Creepy.
We start things off with The Scales. Jillian is a teenage girl about to undergo puberty. Her family has run the town for hundreds of years, and while her father doesn't think her art career will get her anywhere, he does make sure she does odd jobs and chores for their neighbor, Miss Schaffrau. In particular, she helps prepare meals and drawings for Jeffrey, Miss Schaffrau's son, whom she never sees. She suspects, especially after she sees a transient's toy car in her garbage, that she's actually feeding people to Jeffrey, that he must be some kind of deformed monster. Well, she's half right. You see, as she starts developing strange warts on her arm, Miss Schaffrau finally shows her Jeffrey, and indeed he is suffering from some mutations and deformities. But while they do feed transients to him, in reality, Jeffrey is Jillian's brother. Yes, as her father reveals, he and Miss Schaffrau are brother and sister, and Jillian's mother. They've been inbred for hundreds of years, and most of the time mutations and birth defects are kept under control, but occasionally when puberty hits, they become like Jeffrey. And clearly it's happening to her too, so they will have to leave her and Jeffrey together, so they can start their own little family, locked away in the basement. They call it balancing the scales, although Jillian at least sees that Jeffrey is kinder to her than her parents. Next up is The Prospector.
Ha! Wordplay, I love it.
It's a very short story about a prospector who used to come back from his trips with saddles full of gold. After he died, many tried to find the rich vein that he had located, but none ever returned. One such pansifter comes across the prospector's ghost, who keeps proclaiming that he wants his gold dust. He's chased into a cave, where the bones of the prospector's horse rise up. Yes, it seems the ghost just wanted his horse, named Gold Dust, before he passed on. Although, as this new gold seeker observes, if the ghost just wanted his horse, what happened to the others who came looking for gold? Well, perhaps you can ask that monstrosity about to attack you. Continuing on, we have The Last Stop. A kind woman named Crystal gets on a subway train, along with many other people. This train is special. It's called a Redbird, usually run on special occasions. Her fellow passengers are not so kind, mean to their children, pushy, declaring that people should be nuked. And as the train begins going out of control, several are killed as it moves. The conductor of the train is dead. Long dead at that, and they cannot escape thanks to the half-deceased giant rats ready to devour anyone who steps off. Eventually, they reach the last stop. Hell itself! Crystal believes that she's done something terrible, that she deserves being here, and that the train won't be happy until it gets what it wants. Her! And yet, she survives while the rest are burned in a giant oven. Whatever crime she committed that got her here is left to the reader's imagination, for when she arrives back in the train station, a whole new flock of people arrive and keep her from getting off before it starts moving again. Next up is an adaptation of a Bram Stoker tale. Not Dracula, but, well, the title is a slur against Native Americans, and we will not be repeating it on my show.
And if you have a problem with me not wanting to repeat it, you're really going to argue with the undead ghoul who delights in dead things about what he will and won't say on his show?
Anyway, in Nuremberg, a couple meets up with an American tourist named Elias P. Hutchison. Along a castle wall, they spot a black cat and her kitten playing at the base of the castle. Deciding to confuse and frighten the animals, Hutchison drops a stone down, intending to make the cats wonder where the stone came from, but instead the stone hits the kitten and kills it. The black cat stares at Hutchison in anger, a look that reminds it of a time when an Apache woman's own child was killed, and her tribe managed to capture the murderer and gave him over to her. And no man ever before took so long to die. Hutchison recounts how they found the man too late, and that the woman was smiling when he killed her. Hutchison does not fear the cat after a life facing much more terrifying foes, and they proceed on their tourism to a torture tower. They find the famous Iron Maiden of Nuremberg, its door so heavy that it requires a chain pulley system to open it, lest its weight come slamming down on whomever is so unfortunate as to be put inside. Hutchison, wanting a bit of a thrill, bribes the tour guide to let him inside, and even be tied up and let the spikes slowly descend toward him. And that's when the cat strikes. Not at Hutchison, but at the tour guide, making him release the chain pulley as the Iron Maiden slaps shut and kills him. Her vengeance attained.
Revenge is a dish best served overly elaborate and convenient.
And our final story, Deer Xing, or Crossing. A pair of drunken idiots are driving along a dark freeway road when they swerve out of the way of a deer and instead hit another deer with large antlers. The car is wrecked, but they realize the deer must be in much worse shape, having crawled into the forest to die. Deciding to put it out of its misery, they follow the trail, one recounting the story about an abandoned church that fits the description of one they find at the end of the trail. After the congregation turned its back on the church, all sorts of bad things moved into it, and that it's best to stay away. There were markers left to warn people off, but they saw no such markers in there. But they soon realized that said markers were pulled down. For you see, it wasn't a deer they hit, but a satyr, and the rest of its congregation have found them.
Creepy's tagline as the best of illustrated horror continues to ring true, be it stories of revenge or just the creepy terrors of everyday life. Housewarming hello, my children! When last we left the House of Mystery, Fig had given the house back over to Cain on the condition that her lover, Harry, a representation of the house, would be freed of it. So, how does Cain fare as its owner once again?
The house, now located in the middle of a goblin market, still deals with clientele from so many realities, and the currency is still stories. But things seem a bit surlier, especially in light of Cain not having a discerning quality about the clientele. He has promised to stop killing Abel, though he backs out of that deal quite easily. But speaking of a surlier clientele, there is one jackass who decides to enter the house seeking out Fig, and he claims to be her brother. Problem is, Fig has no memory of a brother, so who is he? And why does he like to carry around a knife and stroke it along his sister's feisty body like some kind of really creepy creeper person? Eventually, Fig does remember who he is. Strawberry was her nickname for him, and he was quite a naughty little boy, pulling the wings off of flies, asking very inappropriate questions of innocent creatures. And one of Fig's adventures when he was dragged along, he tried to strangle the prince of the Cloud Kingdom because, well, he was not a good kid. They threw him in prison, and Fig fled, not sure what to tell her parents. And eventually, to keep her parents from getting mad, she made a wish that they'd forget him. And then wished that she herself forgot him. So she did. Things are not made any easier when they tie him up because of him deciding to crawl into bed with Fig. And find later that he has been stabbed to death, Abel standing over him with a knife. The goblins demand blood for blood when someone is murdered, and while at first they do not wish to give Abel up, well, he is the sort who tends to get back up again after he is murdered. So all's well there. That being said, we soon learn that Abel is covering for someone else, another friend of Fig's, Jordan, who has a crush on her, although her heart belongs to Harry. Still, while his body dies, Strawberry's soul soon finds itself with Fig's father and grandfather, who says he'll be helpful in the coming war with the Conception, the mysterious figures behind all these shenanigans. And naturally, being a House of Mystery book, there are stories within stories. The story of Dandy Dirk Prescott, a gay cowboy who was shunned by others in the Wild West, but died helping stop a monster. There's the story of a Samaritan who helps a woman out of the mud, only for it to be a trap so she can steal his wallet and phone. And eventually his life when he gets trapped too. And of course a romantic story of vampire lovers who go through the rom-com traditions, even the third act breakup. The final story, though, is a done-in one set within the walls of the House of Mystery itself, where the hunter, as in the hunter, the representative of all hunters, comes on a quest. See, he wants to be inducted into the gods, but they will only accept him if he brings to them a pure heart. Unfortunately, as good a hunter as he has been unable to find it. So his new method? Just cut out the heart of anyone he sees until he finds it. Fortunately, after some mishaps involving him, well, killing everyone in the bar, he eventually gets his pure heart from Abel, who simply asks him to return it when he's done with it.
We're now more than halfway through the series that was the first episode of the Longbox, my children. And it's still bringing us stories fantastic and terrifying. Muddy morning, my children. In the wake of DC's Rebirth initiative, a group of Batman supporting characters got to team up and fight evil together, including the reformed villain Clayface. But what is this Clayface's origin? Well, it's pretty horrifying, if I do say so myself.
Meet Basil Carlo, at least how he is as a child. His father is an actor, Vincent Carlo, famous for his various monster roles he's taken on. The child is fascinated by all the monster masks his father has, although he also shows him Renew, an industrial chemical that can reshape any material like clay, which he can in turn use to mold his face into anything he may want. Which apparently includes the Joker, I guess. But in any event, his poor father also says that his son shouldn't get into the monster movies. The monsters exist to show the audience what they're supposed to recoil from: ugliness, monstrousness, and there's a monster in all of us that must be hidden away from everyone. Because while people might pretend at the movies, nobody really loves a monster.
Which is silly, of course, my children. You're all here because you do love monsters.
20 years later, Basil is a movie star. One who wants into a film called Second Skin. His agent disagrees, wanting to get him away from horror parts, but this one speaks to him so much. It's about a silent movie monster actor who kills the cast of the talkie remake when they don't put him in the part.
So already it sounds like an amazing film and that agent is an idiot.
For Basil, though, it's personal. He wants to show his aged father, you can show the world that dark, sad part of yourself and still be loved for it. It's a role that can let people see the real him. And indeed, he gets the part. But while driving, he gets the terrible news that his father was found dead in his apartment. And it doesn't get any better when that news gets him into a car accident. He survives, but his face and skin are horribly disfigured by the accident. He screams that this isn't the real him, but there's not much that can be done. This is after skin grafts have been done, and the agent says nobody's going to pay money to see his current look on the big screen, so he's out of the picture.
Although frankly, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. I think he looks so much better that way.
Later, while clearing out his father's apartment, he finds his old supply of Renu, and he uses it to correct his skin. But of course, it's only a temporary fix. He fires Cal, his agent, for spreading rumors that he was disfigured, and drives away his loving girlfriend to try to keep the secret. However, he finds out that he's not going to have enough Renu to get through the production, and contacts Daggett Chemical, the manufacturers, to get more. But the product is no longer made. It was banned when they learned that it would melt the hands of anyone who worked with it. Basil breaks into old Daggett chemical warehouses to obtain the stuff, but is soon confronted by Batman, tipped off about the break-ins. Batman tries to put him down, but instead punches his face in, to his shock and surprise. In the hospital, it's already been revealed to the press who he is, and that he became a clay-faced crook, to the anger of Second Skin's director Veronica St. Clair. She says he was hired for the part for his eyes, the dark sadness and agony he held in them. She didn't care about the injuries he had sustained. She would have fought tooth and nail to keep him in the picture, to truly show the world what he really was. Although, as she notes with the facsimile of a face, he has truly proven that he has shown what he is. A fake who only cared about what the world thought he should be. Batman shows up, offering him a choice that might turn his life around, but Basil blames Batman for this, that his interference caused people to see him as a monster, and nobody loves a monster. Batman, though, says he's not a monster, just a man afraid of what his life might become, and is lashing out. He wants Carlo to testify against Daggett, since he's been illegally experimenting on Renu for decades and destroyed countless lives in his attempts to keep it on the market. And so he has a choice to make. He can just be what the world sees when they look at his face, a monster, or he can be the real person under those looks.
And well, considering what show you're watching, my children, it shouldn't surprise you to learn he chooses the monster.
He tries to steal the supply of Renu that the district attorney has stashed away as evidence, but some corrupt cops attempt to shoot him to keep him quiet for Daggett, instead hitting the Renu supply and spilling it all over him. Oh, and one other thing that Batman mentioned that Renu does, it screws up the brain a bit, making someone more aggressive and unbalanced, which of course both Batman and the people filming Second Skin discover as Basil Carlo arrives, now as Clayface. His poor girlfriend tries to calm him down, but in his deranged state, he decides to show her that there's a monster in everybody by pouring a jar of Renu on her. What becomes of that? Well, that's a story with even more victims in it.
This version of Clayface is a tragedy of terror, my children. Terror of what people might see if you let them see the real you. Terror of losing what you have. Perhaps people should just learn it's okay to feel terror, and they'll learn to love a monster. Count the stones, my children! A lot of horror writers need to get their Lovecraft on a bit. So let's see what happens with an adaptation of a Stephen King story with just such a thing happening, shall we?
The titular N is actually Nathan, a man suffering from obsessive-compulsive disorder, as he speaks to his therapist, Dr. John Bonsaint. For the purposes of anonymity, John writes about him in his notes under the letter N, but otherwise it really has no other bearing on the story.
A Stephen King story where the title is not actually that relevant to the plot? What an oddity!
Nathan is a photographer by hobby, and his OCD comes in the form of counting. Odd numbers are bad, even numbers are good. Prime numbers are bad, but even numbers with lots of factors? Those are really good, especially when it's a string of numbers that add up to an even number. The point being that his affliction has come on very suddenly, when he visited the small town of Mutton, Maine. Going into a clearing called Ackerman's Field past a bridge, he discovers 7 large stones arranged in a circle. But when he looks through his camera, it's actually 8. And indeed, when he counts them up again, there are indeed 8 stones in the circle. He was completely uneasy during the whole process, but the very act of touching the stones seemed to fix them. And yet, everything was wrong with it. And so he ran back to his car, finally looking back at it, and seeing some kind of maelstrom in the middle of the stones, and a face in that maelstrom grinning back at him. 8 stones to keep this, whatever it is, captive. It had to be 8. If it were just 7, then whatever was on the other side of that storm would come flooding out into our world. Nathan is plagued by nightmares after that. Piles of human skulls littered throughout broken cities, and a giant, malevolent being devouring people. The thing that had escaped from Ackerman's Field. But, of course, that's just a nightmare, right? Well, it's a living one for Norma Ackerman, the current owner of the field, and now an old lady. Her father went mad at that field and murdered the rest of her family. But she knows. She too has to keep watch over that field. She spotted Nathan fleeing and realizes that soon he will be the one to take over her duties, though puts up signs and chains to keep people out. Soon she dies, committing suicide, but thankful that Nathan is now there to take over the job from her. As for Nathan, he realizes that the power of the stones wanes and strengthens along the lines of the solstice, with it being safest during the winter and weakening during the summer. During the winter, Nathan even feels compelled to believe that this is all a product of his mind, that there is no monster out there, no other dimension with a creature named Chthon, waiting to emerge should he not do his duty. And yet, during the summer, he feels compelled to go out and strengthen the stones by acknowledging their presence. Sometimes it even takes longer to count the 8th stone, but eventually it happens. But even he knows that he did not have the resolve of Norma Ackerman as his mind continues to collapse, finally telling Dr. Bonsaint that he won't be needing his services anymore. And kills himself, too. Dr. Bonsaint, though, decides to look into it himself, and soon finds himself in the same trap. Each victim of this occupation feels that if they die without a new caretaker chosen, the stones will hold on their own, and the cycle will be broken, as if this gateway's lock becomes weakened by knowledge of its existence. And while a guardian can shore up its defenses, the door will only be permanently closed when no one knows about it. But it's not helped when Dr. Bonsaint soon commits suicide and leaps off a bridge, his sister soon following suit when she learns of all this thanks to the notes her brother left behind about it. And then after her suicide, their famous childhood friend Charlie learns of all this and even prints an article about it, postulating whether a location could induce obsessive-compulsive disorder. Charlie soon realizes that he too is being compelled to continue. although he has his own solution to the problem of new guardians of the stones, a part of his own induced madness, as he slaughters a group of tourists who have come to check out the Circle of Stones before, like the others before him, taking his own life.
Whether or not Charlie's actions stop things permanently is uncertain, my children. But that's how things go in such stories. Madness, monsters, and mayhem. 3 great elements of horror. Welcome, campers! 2 days ago, we talked about how important it was for people to see the real you. And it's a lesson especially relevant to today's protagonist when she goes to summer camp.
Skye is a teenage girl going through typical teenage girl problems. Her parents are divorced, she hates her stepmother, whom she refers to as her step-monster, and she especially doesn't like spending time with her father and stepmother during the summer because of that hatred and discomfort. But her mother is going to Rwanda for the summer, and she can't take care of her anyway. But she reassures Skye that there's going to be a surprise waiting for her when she gets there. And indeed, her stepmother is as frightening as ever, and not really all that friendly to Skye. But it seems the 3 adults have made a decision about Skye. She could really use some friends and a chance to have some real fun. So instead of staying with them during the summer, she's off to summer camp. Naturally, someone like Skye is not too keen on the great outdoors in the woods, on spending time with strangers, but everyone seems to agree it's for the best, although they can't seem to remember the name of the camp. Was it Camp Highlight? No, that wasn't it. Oh, right! Camp Midnight! She's put on the bus and on her way, though everything seems darker, scarier, except for the cute boy alert! But she gets pushed to the back of the bus. Still, she does meet someone pretty cool, Mia, who doesn't like to be touched, but is so excited to be going back to Camp Midnight again. Skye is reluctant to make friends, not wanting to let her stepmother win this fight. But Mia seems pretty cool, and they seem to become quick friends along the way. Although even when she arrives at camp, Skye wants to just leap out the emergency exit and get out, something the bus driver isn't too keen on. Until Skye says that a ghost did it, then she's okay with it.
Little known fact about ghosts, they always use the emergency exits. Makes them less spooked.
Camp Midnight is most certainly an unusual place. Everyone is expected to go to bed at 4 p.m. and be up at midnight. Weirder still is that neither Skye nor Mia are on the housing list, so they just get assigned to the Medusa cabin, where Skye must contend with the popular girls led by Absinthia, whose mother, Counselor Cobb, runs the camp. But it's at midnight, when everyone goes to the main lodge for a midnight snack, that things become much clearer. This is a camp for monsters! Everyone is allowed to let loose and reveal their true forms. Witches, werewolves, and warlocks abound. Both Skye and Mia refuse to. Skye for obvious reasons, and Mia for more secretive reasons. Skye manages to hold off the confused looks of her fellow campers by claiming that she wouldn't want to terrify them. She's the worst kind of creature there is.
Ah, a YouTube commenter.
They buy it, and Skye does her best to try to fit in despite her reluctance to do so amidst all the monsters. The other kids start to think of her as cool because of how mysterious she is, though on the inside Skye is freaking out and wanting to get away from all the monsters. Her tone changes though when her crush seems to respond to her affection in kind when he goes skinny dipping in his werewolf form. He talks about how the word monster is a label that wraps up too many people. And Skye just seems to realize that she's the real monster around here, the one everyone would hate if they knew the truth about her. But Mia's secret is just as bad, based on the prejudicial words of the others in the camp. Mia's a ghost, a spirit who can't move on, and her parents didn't want her around anymore. They were strict and found her carrying on to be too depressing for them. They just wanted her to go away, so she went back to the only place that made her happy. Camp Midnight! Realizing how silly it is that they have to hide themselves from the camp, Sky reveals it to everyone, to their shock and surprise, but makes an impassioned speech about how really most of the kids that were sent to the camp are there because their parents don't know what to do with them. Counselor Cobb finds that a compelling enough argument for them to stay, although Mia can't because she finally finds her happiness and manages to move on from the mortal realm. But hey, it's not all that bad. She had a fun camp experience that she tells her mom all about, especially her new werewolf boyfriend and stuff.
Camp Midnight is a good one for all you little ones out there who need to be reminded that sometimes you can let your true self out. Because you're beautiful, even if you're a human girl in a camp for creatures. Gonna stay up late, my children! Last year, we talked about Freddy's War, the first 3 issues of Wildstorm's Nightmare on Elm Street comics. But as I said last year, it was an ongoing series. So what happened next?
In Freddy's War, a girl named Jade, along with her father and brother, moved to Springwood and was soon attacked by Freddy. After her brother was killed and claw marks appeared on her back, her father joined forces with her in the dream world to try to destroy Freddy, and were unsuccessful, with Jade being killed. Her heart, however, was a perfect match for a little girl named Lacey Powell, who was being kept in a chemically induced coma, only occasionally rising to REM sleep when her medication was being changed. Thus it granted her a certain immunity to Freddy, and issue 4 now shows us that that immunity has carried over after she's out of the coma. Freddy can't seem to harm her, while she can harass him all she wants. And indeed, as she manages to evade Freddy's claws, he gets too annoyed and distracted to slaughter his other victims. One of said victims offers to be his agent on the other side, try to find information on Lacey that he can use against her. As long as Freddy spares him, of course. Mind you, Freddy makes sure to take one of his nose rings off to ensure he doesn't try to renege on the deal. Unfortunately for him, there's like 100 Powells in Springwood, which does not make his task easier. Eventually, he manages to find her address by buying some flowers and going to the Springwood Hospital, claiming that they were a delivery for her from her grandmother. And the hospital staff gives out her address to him.
Overdosing Hypnosil, corrupt or stupid mental health care workers. Yes, just another fine example of Springwood's excellent healthcare system at work.
After Lacey manages to use some dream powers of her own to keep Freddy from killing a man, his agent arrives at Lacey's house with the flowers. But her parents note that her grandparents are all dead. After confirming that she's there, he learns that they're planning on moving, which might be an issue for the good Mr. Kruger. He contacts him in the dream world and tells him about them moving, so Freddy instructs him to murder her, much to his reluctance, although Freddy, of course, is quite persuasive. Lacey is wise to all this, though, and warns her parents that the Flower Man is coming to kill her. Her mother, being a smart parent, recalls the Flower Man from before and has a bad feeling about it, calling the police to come over and check in, right when he tries to break into their house. They shoot him dead, but he's not too upset about that. After all, it's better than falling asleep. Lacey says her farewell to Freddy, though he warns her that she'll be back, and he'll be waiting.
A nice little done-in-one to remind us, my children, that in the end, you have the most power over your dreams, and the demons within them. But just remember that they'll always be there. Happy Halloween, my children! While there are, of course, more aliens versus predator stories out there, and we will likely be talking about them for many years to come, today we mark the end of Machiko Noguchi's story in this conflict.
On the planet Kaparis 7, a mining corporation soon finds itself having some unexpected visitors. Xenomorphs! But this is strange. They have arrived on a ship that landed. But what's even stranger is that the Xenomorphs are being held on leashes. Held by predators! Soon the Colonial Marines, led by the android Colonel Rast, come knocking at the door of Machiko, now 10 years older after the events of Aliens vs. Predator War. She has retired alongside Brian Ellis from that miniseries and wants no part of what the Marines are asking for. At least until they show her footage of the attack on the mining colony. Predators killing unarmed, ordinary civilians? And controlling the Xenomorphs to boot? Now that is interesting. She tells the tale of a legend that she heard from the Predators during her time with them, of renegade clans of their species that were more killers than hunters. Predators normally believe in honor in facing a worthy opponent, but the killers? Well, it's all in the name. They just want to slaughter anything in their path, and had found a way to turn their prey into weapons. The idea of using the Xenomorphs for anything but sport was antithetical to everything the hunters stood for. They thought the killers had been wiped out, but it seems they are still around, and have to be stopped.
Indeed, such savage killers who think only of killing must be stopped. By killing them!
Machiko, along with her crew and the Colonial Marines, make their way to Ryushi, Machiko's colony from the original Aliens vs. Predator comic. It is now a place where the Predators do some regular hunting. Machiko contacts the hunters and uses her limited ability to communicate with them to arrange a truce between the two forces, a joint operation to fight the killers. They're able to convince the Predators of their value when they help the hunters subdue and capture a Xenomorph queen, planning to use it for breeding future sport. Machiko remains with the Predators to help coordinate the attack, but once they arrive at Kaparis, the killers are ready, using a jamming device to scramble their sensors and communication, leading to a near slaughter of the ground forces sent in. Fortunately, Ellis devises a plan to save them and the mission. They remove the warhead from one of the ship's nukes and basically use it like a giant bullet, launching it at the presumed location of the jamming device. They succeed, allowing the attack to continue. Unfortunately, the killer's ship starts getting away, but it allows the hunters to place a tracker on them, leading the joint task force back to their home planet. In the meantime, the Marines get their hands on, well, a hand, one from the killers. While they chase the ship, they discover that the killers controlled the Xenomorphs through pheromones, some synthetic concoction that the humans can't replicate, that allows them to convey instructions to the swarm. The killers are well prepared for an orbital assault, pounding the ships in orbit to the point that Machiko instructs her own crew to land, since they're otherwise ignoring the dropships. Ground forces do not meet with an easy time themselves, though, ambushed by killers, walking right into a nest of Xenomorph eggs. And even Rast himself is damaged, but alive, captured by the killers out of curiosity for his android form. He contacts the others and informs them that there's a second step to the killers controlling the Xenomorphs. The aliens have no queen! A queen's natural pheromones would override the synthetic ones. So how convenient is it that they just happen to have a queen on board the hunter's ship that, if dropped into the killer's storehouse of Xenomorph eggs, well, the killers would be without an army. Machiko goes into the heart of enemy territory with the Queen and an entourage of predators, the Queen immediately managing to turn the Xenomorphs on their would-be masters. Ellis, in the meantime, leads a crew into the area to rescue Machiko, knowing that she does not share the other predators' desire for glory and battle and, well, potentially their own deaths. The predators are all too happy to ready their self-destructs and annihilate both the killers and the xenomorphs. But fortunately, Ellis and company arrive to rescue her, something the predators are not happy about, and thus punish her in a most honorable fashion. They use the xenomorph acid blood on her forehead, removing the mark that signified her as a friend and ally to their kind, and let her live, Machiko choosing humanity once again. But hey, she gets to not be blown up, so that's a plus. While the humans are a little upset that all the nice alien technology got away from them, Machiko does tell Rast that they detected another base for the killers, so they can go and deal with that while Machiko finishes up her retirement. Happy ending for everyone! Well, except for the killers. They got slaughtered by everybody!
But hey, at least they got to rest. Which is what it's time for me to do, my children. Happy Halloween! I hope you enjoyed another treat from Moarte. The seasons change, die off, live again, and I shall always return to share such delights from the Longbox again.